Chapter 924. The arrival of the demon race's old ancestors, saints, and demon children to the ancient sacred sect of the ancient sacred state was actually a sign of good relations between the two races. This move was also to tell the cultivators of the two races that from now on, the demon race of the northern demon continent and the human race of the Sky River continent were no longer enemies, but friends. The demon race and the human race had become friends and were even living together. This sounded a bit funny, but in this world, this was not the first time such a situation had happened. In many continents, several races coexisted. Therefore, there was nothing strange about such a thing. If one thought it was strange, it could only be said that one's vision was narrow. There were many things that one had never seen before, but it didn't mean that they didn't exist. It was a very simple truth. The world was so big, who dared to say that they knew everything? There shouldn't be. After this peace talk, it was believed that in the near future, the contact between the two races would become more frequent. At that time, the demon race might come to the other three continents of the Sky River continent, and the human race could also go to the unfamiliar northern demon continent to gain experience through the Bloodgate. The date of the banquet was determined. On this day, the ancient sacred sect was naturally the most lively. 3 days ago, the three old ancestors of the demon race, the saints and Sha Yelu and the other demon children had arrived at the ancient sacred sect. Compared to the older generation, Sha Yelu and the other demon children were naturally very curious about the ancient sacred sect. This was the first time they had seen a human sect force. It was completely different from the demon race's tribes. Sha Yelu and the other old ancestors were naturally received by Shao Sheng and the others, and the demon saints were also received by the human saints. Finally, the task of receiving Sha Mo and the other demon children naturally fell to Shao Chun and the other holy sons and saintesses. Needless to say, Shao Chun was naturally responsible for receiving Sha Mo. With the success of the peace talk between the two races, the relationship between Shao Chun and Sha Mo had become much closer. During these 3 days in the ancient sacred sect, Shao Chun took Sha Mo to every corner of the ancient sacred sect. This time, Sha Mo also brought his wife to the ancient sacred sect. Sha Mo's wife was also from the demon race. Although Shao Chun didn't find her beautiful according to human standards, Shao Chun knew that Sha Mo's wife was known as the #1 beauty in the northern demon continent from the attitude of the other demon heirs. It was true that everyone had their own preferences. This was also the same reason why Sha Mo looked at Qin Shi and the other two women. In the human race, Qin Shi and the other two women's appearances were absolutely top-notch. However, in the eyes of the demon race, Sha Mo was not interested. According to Sha Mo, Qin Shi and the other two women were too white. In the human race, it could be said that a white woman covered 100 ugliness, but in the devil race, if a woman was too white, she would not be good-looking. No devil race member would like her. The culture of the two races was very different. The only thing they had in common was probably cultivation and wine. There was no need to talk about cultivation. Whether it was the human race, the demon race, or any other race, cultivation was a common topic. All races wanted to become stronger. As for wine, how to put it, the human race cultivators loved to drink, and so did the demon race cultivators. That was all. He brought Sha Mo and his wife to stroll around the ancient sacred sect for 3 days. During this time, the holy sons and demon sons naturally gathered a few times. However, the scale of the gathering was not large. It could only be considered a private gathering. 3 days later, it was the day of the first banquet between the two races. In the evening, the sacred hall of the ancient saint sect was already decorated with lanterns and colored banners. In the hall, exquisite tables and chairs were arranged neatly. As time passed, the saints of the demon race and the human race arrived one after another. Then, Shao Chun and the other holy sons, as well as Sha Mo and the other demon sons, arrived one after another. The top figures of the two races gathered together. Finally, it was Sha Yelu, Shao Chun, and the other ancestors of the two races. The ancestors sat on the high platform in front of the hall, and on both sides below them were the saints of the two races and the demon sons and holy sons. When everyone took their seats, Sha Yelu took the lead and raised his wine glass. He looked down at the people of the two races and laughed loudly. "Come, everyone, for the sake of the friendship between our two races, let's drink up." As he spoke, Sha Yelu raised his glass to Xiao Sheng and the others beside him, and then took the initiative to drink the wine in his glass in one gulp. With the friendship between the two races and the end of the war, everyone's nerves, which had been tense for 8 years, were completely relaxed. As such, the atmosphere at the banquet was naturally lively. Many people who had fought to the death on the battlefield began to drink with each other at this time. It felt as if the previous battle had been transferred to the drinking table. Such a banquet not only had wine brewed by the human race, but also wine brewed by the demon race. Shamo sat at a table with Shamo. The two clinked their glasses repeatedly, and the wine went down their throats. Shamo also asked at this time, "Brother Xiao Chun, I heard that you will be returning to the Tian Shan continent soon." "And I'm going back." Hearing this, Xiao Chun also nodded. Shamo also knew that Xiao Chun was not from the Tian continent. Seeing this, Shamo's eyes flashed coldly. "This group of damned demonic cultivators, Brother Xiao, do you want me to go with you? These demonic cultivators are most afraid of us, the demon race." Knowing why Xiao Chun returned to the Tianshan continent, Shamo took the initiative to propose to go with Xiao Chun. Obviously, it was out of good intentions. However, hearing this, Xiao Chun shook his head and refused. "No, there's no need to make such a big fuss over some demonic cultivators. Besides, aren't you planning to go out to gain experience? With everyone's strength, dealing with some demonic cultivators was naturally not a problem. Moreover, after the war, Sha Mo also planned to go out and see what the other continents where the demon race lived were like." Rejecting Sha Mo's good intentions. Hearing this, Sha Mo did not insist. Indeed, Xiao Chen's strength was recognized by Sha Mo. If he could not even deal with some demonic cultivators, then that would be a joke. In fact, speaking of demonic cultivators, from a certain point of view, they were indeed very pitiful. As a human, they had to worship the demon race. As a result, the human race no longer accepted them, and the demon race looked down on them, treating them as slaves. It could be said that demonic cultivators were a group of pitiful worms who had abandoned their own bloodline. They did not please either side. Sometimes, Xiao Qin was really puzzled. What was so bad about the human race? Why was it that, as a human, they had to worship the demon race? Was it because the demon race was born stronger than the human race? But what could this prove? Yes, the demon race was indeed born stronger than the human race, but the human race's strength might not necessarily be weaker than the demon race, as they worked hard. Wasn't this war the best proof? Facing the demon race, the human race fought fiercely for 8 years, and in the end, no one had the upper hand. Didn't this prove that the human race was not weaker than the demon race? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 925. Sometimes he really didn't understand the mentality of the demonic cultivators. They didn't want to be good people and insisted on being the dogs of the demonic race. Of course, these were just Xiao Qin's random thoughts when he was bored. Xiao Qin wasn't interested in what the demonic cultivators were thinking. He only felt that they were very pitiful. But pitiful people were hateful. Since they didn't want to be human, Xiao Qin naturally wouldn't treat them as humans. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. It lasted until late at night before the crowd gradually dispersed. After this banquet, the top experts of the two races also became familiar with each other. There were even some demonic saints who took the initiative to invite the human saints to the northern demonic continent for a gathering. Many human saints didn't refuse, as they were also very curious about the northern demonic continent. They wanted to see the difference between the continent where the demonic race lived and the Tiana continent. The banquet ended. The next day, Shamo prepared to leave. He wanted to make a trip back to the northern demonic continent first. Then, he would go out to train with his 3 brothers, Shao Maxiong, and the others. After being trapped in the northern demonic continent for so many years, Shamo was very curious about the outside world. He was even more curious about the demonic race of the other continents. He wanted to see the difference between the demonic race of the other continents and the demonic race of the northern demonic continent. He wanted to see who was stronger and who was weaker. He personally escorted Sha Mo to the teleportation array. As the two races became closer, the ancient sacred sect also built a new teleportation array in the Sacredine continent. Brother Shao Chun, I promise that if there is a chance in the future, I will definitely go to the Tianqian continent to find Shao Chun. Before leaving, Sha Mo imitated the humans and cupped his hands to Shao Chun. Seeing this, Shao Chun smiled. All right, then I will wait for you. Let's drink and chat again. Definitely, Sha Mo said. Then, Sha Mo and his three brothers turned around and stepped into the teleportation array, disappearing. Sha Mo left. In the next few days, the demonic saints and ancestors also left one after another. However, there were also some human saints following them. They had all received an invitation from a saint of the devil race to go to the northern devil continent to take a look. After resting in his cave for a few days, Shao Chun began to prepare for his return to the heavenly Chun continent. This time, it was impossible to return to the heavenly Chun continent through the transboundary transfer array. Therefore, they could only build a starship and travel across the starry sky to the heavenly Chun continent. Building a starship was not a difficult task. The ancient saints sect had the blueprints for building a starship. Moreover, there were several starships parked in the ancient saints sect. There was no need to build another one. They could just lend it to Shao Chun. It was time to leave, but this departure did not mean that it would be forever. Shao Sheng and the other great ancestors had already discussed that in the future, they would build a stable cross-realm transmission array between the Tiana continent and the Tianqian continent to ensure that human warriors on the two continents could travel freely. Building a cross-realm transmission array was indeed a big project. The reason for this was the decision of Shao Sheng and the other great ancestors. After the war, the Tiana continent had suffered a great loss. Therefore, Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs planned to connect the Tiana continent and the Tianqian continent into one continent, connecting the two continents. Since both continents were inhabited by humans, it was not a problem to merge them into one continent. Moreover, there was another thing that surprised Shao Chun. Shao Sheng and the other great ancestors had not told Shao Chun about it. While Shao Chun was preparing to return to the heavenly Chun continent, Shao Sheng and the other great ancestors summoned him to the sacred hall of the ancient sacred sect. There were only 5 people in the sacred hall: Shao Sheng, Randang Cozy Eye, Ice Lotus Ancient Saint, Mingji Ancient Saint, and Shao Chun. Seeing Shao Chun, Shao Sheng smiled. Kid, sit down. He motioned to Shao Chun to sit down. Shao Chun did not stand on ceremony. He sat down cross-legged in front of the 4 great ancestors and looked at Shao Sheng. Great ancestor, why did you call me here? He did not know why Shao Sheng called him here. Facing Shao Chun's question, Shao Sheng smiled and said, There is something I want to tell you. There is something I want to tell you. The 4 of us have discussed and decided to disband the Heavenly Saint Sect, Sun Saint Sect, and Ancient Saint Sect. They wanted to disband the Heavenly Saint Sect, the Sun Saint Sect, and the Ancient Saint Sect? Hearing Shao Sheng's words, Shao Chun did not react for a moment. What did this mean? Why did they want to disband the 3 great saint sects? In this way, wouldn't the Tiana continent become a land without a master? He did not know what Shao Sheng and the other 3 great ancestors were up to. But soon, Shao Sheng also gave an answer. He looked at Shao Chun, the smile on his face disappeared, and he said very seriously, Kid, don't make such an expression. The reason why we disbanded the 3 great saint sects is that the 4 of us plan to establish a new saint sect, a powerful sect that is far more powerful than the 3 great saint sects. Moreover, it's not just the Tiana continent. There are also sects on the Tianqian continent. I have already talked to Saint Danyun and the others. All the sects on the Tianqian continent will be disbanded and merged into this new sect. In the future, the Tianqian continent and the Tiana continent will be managed by this new sect. There will only be one sect on each continent, Shao Sheng said unhurriedly. Hearing his words, Shao Chun was completely stunned. They wanted to gather all the forces on the Tiana continent and the Tiantian continent to build a new saint sect. One could imagine how powerful this sect would be if it was really established. Not to mention the others, just the number of saints alone would probably exceed 40. Moreover, there would at least be 10 holy sons and holy daughters. As for the prospective holy sons, personal disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples, there was no need to mention them. With just a rough estimate, if this sect was really established, the number of people would reach at least 5 million. And this was because of the 8 years of fierce fighting, which reduced the number of saints on the Tiana continent from more than 100 to 40. Otherwise, the number of saints would definitely be more, and the same was true for semi-saints. However, even after the war, Xiao Qian was still a little shocked by the idea of this new sect, because Xiao Qian knew that once this sect was really established, it would definitely be a giant existence. Even the ancient saint sects that were once at their peak were nothing in front of this new sect. Moreover, don't forget that the heavenly Chun continent had the origin source. Xiao Sheng and the other three had already reached the saint realm's great attainment. As long as they had the origin source, they would be able to break through to the quasi-saint realm. In that case, this new sect would become a quasi-saint sect. Moreover, it would be a quasi-saint sect with 4 quasi-saints in charge, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. This chapter ends. Chapter 926. Gathering all the forces of the Tiana continent and the Tiantian continent to build a sect, one could imagine how powerful this sect would be once it was established. Needless to say, the number of powerhouses would be unimaginable. Just the cultivation secret realms would be extremely terrifying. Xiao Qian had seen the cultivation holy lands of the ancient sacred sect, the heavenly sacred sect, and the sun sacred sect. Now that all these cultivation secret realms would be gathered in one sect, one could imagine how beneficial it would be to the disciples of the sect, especially to the people of the Tiantian continent. It was no exaggeration to say that if this sect was really established, the warriors of the Tiantian continent would improve by leaps and bounds. This was because the warriors of the Tiantian continent had never even heard of these cultivation secret realms before. He didn't expect that Xiao Sheng had called him here today to talk about this matter. Moreover, judging from Xiao Sheng's words, the establishment of a new sect had already been approved by all the saints. This matter could be said to have been settled. In fact, this was not surprising. If Xiao Sheng and the others had made this suggestion before, many people would have objected. However, after 8 years of fierce war with the demon race, the 3 saints had joined forces with the 3 saints. The people of the 3 sacred sects were fighting side by side. They had long abandoned the idea of sections. If no one said anything, they would think that they were all from the same sect. War was the best way to witness true feelings. Therefore, under such circumstances, Xiao Sheng and the others' idea of establishing a new sect was naturally pushing the boat along with the current. Almost everyone raised both hands in approval. It could be said that the establishment of this new sect was a matter of convenience and was also an irresistible trend. After recovering from the shock, he had to admit that Xiao Sheng and the others were doing great things in silence. They had actually established such a terrifying secondary saint sect without saying anything. It was simply exhaling a mouthful of turbid air. Xiao Qian looked at Xiao Sheng and the others and said, "Since the ancestors have already made a decision, I naturally have no objections. However, ancestor, you didn't come here today just to tell me about this, right?" He felt that Xiao Sheng shouldn't have called him here today for this matter. After all, the establishment of the new sect had been decided. It didn't matter whether he was told or not. Moreover, in this matter, Xiao Qian couldn't make the decision. Sure enough, after hearing Xiao Qian's words, Randa and Cozy Eye smiled and said, "Of course not. Of course not. The reason why I'm telling you this is because of what's about to happen next. You know that the establishment of a new sect is very complicated. Just the composition of the members is very troublesome. The saints are naturally easy to deal with, but the holy sons and holy virgins are somewhat troublesome. All the holy sons and holy virgins of the three holy sects will be incorporated into the new sect. In this case, we naturally need to select the first holy son to be the leader of all the disciples of the new sect. He will become a symbol of our new sect and the target of worship and pursuit of many disciples. After hearing Randang Cozy Eye's words, Xiao Chun seemed to vaguely understand something. Soon, he said with a look of disbelief, "For ancestors, don't tell me that you want me to be the first holy son of this new sect." After guessing the intentions of Randang Cozy Eye and the others, when they heard Xiao Chen's words, they all smiled and nodded to show that they agreed. Seeing this, Xiao Chun decisively shook his head and refused without hesitation. "Don't joke. For ancestors, me, as the first holy son? Isn't this a joke? I'm only at the perfection of the Tao Master Realm. How can I convince everyone? I think it's better to let senior brother Chun, you be the first holy son." The first holy son was indeed a symbol of status, but many things were built on strength. If you didn't have the strength, yet you sat on the position of the first holy son, wasn't that just looking for trouble for yourself? Would the other holy sons be convinced by you? Although Xiao Chun had grown a lot in the past 8 years, he still knew himself well. With his current strength, not to mention Chun Yu, Xiao Chun didn't even have the absolute confidence to win against Emperor Qing. If you don't have the strength, don't covet those things that don't belong to you. Otherwise, you'll only be asking for trouble. Seeing Xiao Chun shake his head like a rattle drum, Xiao Sheng scolded angrily. "Kid, you really don't know what's good for you. Letting you be the first holy son is because we think highly of you. Moreover, we didn't say that we'll announce it now. Before the announcement, the 4 of us old fellows will think of a way to raise your cultivation to the Tao Emperor realm and completely eliminate the hidden dangers in your body to help you stabilize your foundation." Xiao Sheng and the others knew that Xiao Chun hadn't broken through to the Tao Emperor realm for an entire 8 years, and it was entirely because he was deliberately suppressing it. As for the reason, it was needless to say. It was because Xiao Chun had broken through too quickly, and it had already caused damage to his foundation. So, Xiao Chun had no choice but to suppress his cultivation. For the establishment of a new sect this time, the saints were easy. After all, the saints weren't ranked, and they wouldn't clearly distinguish the strong and the weak. However, the saints and saintesses were different. They had to be ranked, and that was slightly troublesome. If all the saints and saintesses of the 3 great sects were to be merged into the new sect, then who would be the first holy son? After thinking about it and discussing it a few times, Xiao Sheng and the others felt that Xiao Chun was the most suitable. Firstly, Xiao Chen's natural talent had already proved that he was the strongest amongst all the saints and saintesses, and even Chun Yu couldn't compare to him. The stronger his natural talent was, the greater Xiao Chen's future accomplishments would be, and this was definitely something that couldn't be ignored as the first holy son. Yet now, the only thing that Xiao Chun lacked was his cultivation and strength. So, Xiao Sheng and the others decided that the 4 of them would join forces and think of a way to advance Xiao Chen's cultivation to the Tao Emperor realm. At the same time, they would eliminate the latent dangers within Xiao Chen's body and help Xiao Chun truly firm his foundation so that it wouldn't affect his cultivation in the future. So long as Xiao Chen's cultivation was able to advance to the Tao Emperor realm, even if it was just the basics, Xiao Sheng and the others believed that Xiao Chen's strength would absolutely not be inferior to Chun Yu and the others at that time. In that way, no one would dare say anything if Xiao Chun took the position of the first holy son. Xiao Chun was slightly hesitant when he heard Xiao Sheng. Even though it was a good thing that the 4 of them would assist him in improving his cultivation, Xiao Chun wasn't really interested in the position of the first holy son. It was just a title that didn't have any substance. He was still slightly hesitant. However, at this moment, Xiao Sheng didn't give Xiao Chun the chance to refuse, and he simply didn't ask for Xiao Chen's opinion and directly made the decision. All right, it's decided. After the new sect is established, the position of the first holy son will be Xiao Chen's. As for the holy sons below him, it will be based on strength. When the time comes, we'll hold a ranking battle between the holy sons. Begging to be begging to be recommended. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 9:27. Without giving Xiao Chen a chance to speak, Xiao Sheng directly made the decision. Randang Cozy Eye and the other two nodded in agreement. Only Xiao Chen was left in a mess. The title of First Holy Son was indeed enviable. In terms of status, the First Holy Son was probably second only to Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors. However, in Xiao Chen's opinion, the title of First Holy Son was completely useless. Not only was it useless, but it would also cause him a lot of trouble. Just think about it. If the new sect was established, he would directly become the First Holy Son, and the other Holy Sons would have to compete to be ranked. This was definitely a shady deal. He could imagine how much the other Holy Sons and Holy Daughters would hate him. Xiao Chen did not need to participate in any competition to become the first Holy Son of the new sect. However, the other Holy Sons would have to compete. This was simply pushing a duck onto a perch. Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors were bitter, but they did not care about this. They had already said what needed to be said. Xiao Sheng waved his hand and said, "Okay, you can go now. We will set off for the heavenly Chan continent in 3 days." He motioned for Xiao Chen to leave. However, seeing this, Xiao Chen said tentatively that, "Ancestor, should we reconsider the matter of the first Holy Son?" "Reconsider my ass. If I say it's you, it's you. Get lost." Xiao Chen still did not give up. However, Xiao Sheng immediately scolded him when he heard this. In the face of the first Holy Son that everyone coveted, Xiao Chen had become a hot potato. He could not wait to throw it away. This made Xiao Sheng feel very frustrated. If it were not for Randang Cozy Eye and the other two ancestors beside him, Xiao Sheng would have given him a hard kick. Damn it, this kid is a typical example of taking advantage of others and still pretending to be innocent. Doesn't he know that all this is for his own good? Xiao Sheng insisted on promoting Xiao Chen to the position of the first saint. To put it bluntly, Xiao Sheng still had his own selfish motives. However, in the face of his good intentions, Xiao Chen had rejected him in every possible way. This naturally made Xiao Sheng burn with anger. Seeing that Xiao Sheng was furious, Xiao Chen tactfully stopped talking and left the hall obediently. It seemed like there was no room for negotiation in this matter. However, when he thought about it, it wasn't a bad thing. At the very least, Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors would be able to assist him in breaking through into the Tao Emperor realm. Moreover, they would be able to eliminate the hidden injuries that had accumulated in his body. Merely this alone made Xiao Chen profited. Of course, to be honest, Xiao Chen was actually not against the position of the first Holy Son. He just found it troublesome. Thinking about it, if he became the first Holy Son, wouldn't he be busy all the time? But now that things had come to this, since he couldn't refuse, he could only accept his fate. After thinking it through, Xiao Chen no longer bothered about this problem. Now it was better to go back to the heavenly Chan continent and deal with those demonic cultivators first. On the way back to his residence, Xiao Chen accompanied Qin Shiru and the other two girls for the next few days. At the same time, Xiao Chen also brought Xiao Qing, Bai Ruyue, and the others to the ancient saint sect. They were about to return to the heavenly Chan continent. As such, the cultivators from the Tiana continent naturally had to accompany them. Moreover, it wasn't just the people from the heavenly Chan continent. The Tiana continent would also send some experts over. For example, Xiao Sheng, Randang Cozy Eye, Ancient Saint Ice Lotus, and Ancient Saint Mungjia would be going to the heavenly Chan continent together this time. The four ancestors were going together. Firstly, it was to deal with the demonic cultivators on the Blood Demon continent. Secondly, it was probably for the source energy of the heavenly Chan continent. There is no need to worry about the demonic cultivators on the Blood Demon continent. What really gave the four ancestors a headache was the establishment of the new sect. Although this new sect wasn't built from scratch, after all, it was built on the foundation of the Ancient Saints sect, the other three great sects, and all the other sects and forces on the heavenly Qin continent. Many things were actually relatively simple. After all, it was to establish a new sect, so there were still many trivial matters. Xiao Chen naturally didn't worry about these matters. He calmly accompanied his parents and Qin Shiru. 3 days passed in a flash. On the fourth day, a huge starship soared into the sky from the ancient saint sect. It quickly rushed out of the clouds and disappeared into the starry sky. Starships were the most common means of transportation between continents. The second most common was the transboundary transmission array. It was truly 500 meters long and could carry 10,000 people at full capacity. This starship was very huge. However, although it was huge, its speed was definitely not slow. However, just as it left the Tiana continent, the starship suddenly accelerated. The surrounding stars seemed to be jumping and flashing in front of its eyes. Its speed had exceeded the speed of sound. It was even faster than the speed of a saint crossing the void. This was the first time Xiao Chen had taken a starship. Inside the starship, there was a huge resting space. At this time, he and Qin Shiru were looking at the stars flashing by outside. Xiao Chen said with a chuckle, "This speed is really fast. Of course, this starship speed is more than 100 times that of a saint." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao said with a smile, "Let alone a saint. Even a quasi-saint and a great saint couldn't compare to a starship in speed." This was why even a quasi-saint and a great saint would choose to take a starship when traveling in the starry sky. After all, riding a starship was not only fast, but also extremely comfortable. Not only could they cultivate inside the ship, but they could also enjoy various leisure and entertainment activities. For this trip to the Tianqian continent, Xiao Sheng and the other 4 ancestors arranged several famous chefs in the Tiana continent in this starship. With these chefs, not only could they taste good wine and delicacies, but there were also many beautiful dancers to liven up the atmosphere. It can be said that riding a starship was a kind of enjoyment. Of course, with so many advantages of a starship, its shortcomings are also extremely obvious. First of all, the size of a starship is generally very large. Second, the acceleration process of a starship is very long, and the deceleration process is also very long. Therefore, starships are only suitable for long-distance flight, not short-distance flight. Because of this, starships were only suitable for traveling between continents and not within continents. This was because the distance between continents was too short and there wasn't enough space for a starship to accelerate. Even smaller continents might not have enough space for a starship to accelerate. Like a big fish, the starship shuttled through the starry sky. Inside the starship, Xiao Chun and the others were living very comfortably. They tasted good wine with Qin Shiru and the other 2 women, as well as Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue. But at this time, Xiao Qin's gaze was fixed on the 2 young women standing next to Fei Mei and the other 3 women. These 2 women were Qing Yao and Qing Luo, who had been following Xiao Chun since the Tianqian continent. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of this chapter. Chapter 928. He looked at Qing Yao and Qing Luo. Ever since they went to the Tiana continent, they had been living in a small city in the Tianqian continent. Because of this, Xiao Chun had not found them until the end. However, this was also good. In general, the 2 girls had not encountered any danger. Now, with the addition of Qing Yao and Qing Luo, Xiao Sheng's 6 maids were finally gathered. Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Lu Zhu, and Si Zhu were just maids by Xiao Chen's side. They had not shown themselves yet, but soon, these 6 maids would become the dream lovers of many holy sons of large sections. At the same time, the fame of these 6 maids in the future would make some holy sons fear them. Of course, this was all in the future. On this trip to the Tianqian continent, everyone drank to their heart's content in the starship. This time, apart from the warriors and the 4 patriarchs of the Tianqian continent, Chen Yu, Emperor Qing, Hu Fei, and Jiang Yu had followed along. Moreover, there were many experts from the Tiana continent. Of course, most of these experts were only in the half-saint realm. Everyone rushed to the Tianqian continent. Randang Kozii and the others had not been to the Tianqian continent, but they knew the general direction, roughly estimating that it would take half a month to reach the Tianqian continent from the Tiana continent. Half a month was very fast. Moreover, with their current strength, they were not afraid of the Blood Demon continent at all. Therefore, they were not in a hurry. Along the way, they either cultivated or drank to relax, especially Chunyu. He dragged Xiao Chun, Emperor Qing, and the others to drink all day long. This made everyone speechless. No matter what, Chunyu was still the first holy son of the ancient sacred sect. However, this fellow had become an out-and-out playboy during the past few days on the starship. He drank, chatted, and flirted with the dancers. It could be said that he was extremely dissolute. In the end, Xiao Chun, Emperor Qing, and the others simply did not come out of seclusion and did not bother with Chunyu. Out of sight, out of mind. The days inside the starship were peaceful and leisurely. It could be considered a rare opportunity for everyone to relax. Just like that, they traveled through the endless starry sky for about 8 days. The previously peaceful starry sky suddenly became lively on this day. In other words, Xiao Chun and the others finally encountered other starships in the starry sky. Right in front of everyone, 2 starships were fighting fiercely. Around the 2 starships, many people were fighting fiercely. Everyone came to the deck and looked at the 2 battleships that were fighting fiercely. At this time, Randang Kozii and the other 3 had also come to the deck and looked into the distance. Randang Kozii said calmly, "Are they space pirates?" Xiao Chun and the others were unfamiliar with the term space pirates, but Randang Kozii and the other ancestors had heard of them before. Since the starships were built by the major clans one after another, the originally desolate and lonely starry sky gradually became prosperous. The continents were linked together by starships, passing through each other. And on these starships, there were martial artists who were out adventuring. There were also starships of the various saint sects, and there were even starships of companies that engaged in trade. Because all kinds of people began to travel between the various continents, the number of starships continued to increase, and the endless starry sky also became prosperous. However, with the prosperity of the starry sky, some people with evil intentions began to gather together and engage in illegal activities in the starry sky. These people were called space pirates. Because the Tina continent and the Tianxin continent were at the edge of the endless starry sky, there were no other continents around except for the northern demon continent. Therefore, this place was relatively desolate, so there were not many space pirates. However, the closer one got to the center of the starry sky, the more space pirates there were. Some powerful space pirates were not weaker than the quasi-sage sections. When traveling in the starry sky, the most important thing to be wary of was space pirates, because they were a group of people who valued money more than their lives. They did not expect to encounter space pirates here. Looking at the appearance of the 2 starships in front, they had indeed encountered space pirates. After briefly explaining the space pirates to everyone and hearing Randang Koziai's words, Jiang Yu said, "So it's a group of space pirates. Since we have encountered them, let's help them." Jiang Yu proposed to help, and no one objected. Anyway, with their strength, as long as they did not encounter a quasi-sage, there was basically no danger. And quasi-sages were not easy to meet. In this era, it was likely that quasi-sages would only appear on the high-level continents, and there were certainly no quasi-sages in the marginal areas like the Tina continent and the Tianxin continent. No one objected. Subsequently, Saint Danyun, Saint Jiuxiao, and the others attacked one after another. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others did not fall behind. A group of people flew directly out of the starship and flew toward the battlefield. The space pirates, who had originally gained the upper hand, were now facing a middle-aged man who seemed to be their leader. He shouted angrily, "Quick, blast open the protective array of this starship." They thought that victory was already in their grasp. But as soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, Xiao Chun and the others arrived and directly joined the battle. The 2 sides were in a melee. It was not difficult to distinguish which side was the space pirates, because one side was wearing the same uniform and looked like a disciple of a certain sect, while the other side was somewhat nondescript and looked more ferocious. Therefore, these people must be the space pirates. Directly joining the battle, facing the sudden appearance of Xiao Chun and the others, the group of space pirates, who originally had the upper hand, was killed almost instantly. The strength of this group of space pirates was not strong, and the middle-aged man in the lead was only a half-saint. There was not a single saint in the entire group of space pirates. With such strength, naturally, they were no match for Xiao Chun and the others. He could also see that Saint Jiu Xiao and Saint Dan Yun were saints. Seeing 6 or 7 saints appear at once, the middle-aged man's eyelids twitched, and he shouted without hesitation, "Let's go! What a joke! 6 or 7 saints, and Xiao Chun, and many other experts." The middle-aged man was not a fool and naturally did not dare to fight head-on with Xiao Chun and the others. He wanted to retreat, but Saint Jiu Xiao obviously would not let him do as he wished. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and Saint Jiu Xiao snorted coldly. "You want to leave now? It's too late." As he spoke, he pointed a finger, and a thunderbolt flashed, instantly penetrating the middle-aged man's glabella. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 9:29. The Saint of Nine Heavens killed the leader of the interstellar bandits, the middle-aged man, with just one finger. With the death of their leader, the group of interstellar bandits immediately panicked and began to flee in private. After a short chase, a small number of people managed to escape to their starships. They didn't dare to stay for a moment and directly drove the starships away. It was the first time that Xiao Chun had encountered interstellar bandits. After this encounter, he also had a preliminary understanding of them. As Randang Cozy Eye said, these interstellar bandits were actually a group of desperados gathered together. Take these interstellar bandits as an example. There were people of various races, and their composition was extremely complicated. There were humans, demons, and even many races that Xiao Chun had never seen before. For money and all kinds of treasures, these desperados gathered together and wandered in the endless starry sky all year round in order to rob starships and plunder their supplies. After defeating these interstellar bandits, Xiao Chun and the others turned their eyes to another starship. This starship was obviously much smaller than the one that Xiao Chun and the others were on. Its hull was only 100 meters long. As Xiao Chun and the others looked at it, the hundreds of young men and women in uniform on the starship also looked over. At the same time, a handsome young man strode out of the crowd, came to the Saint of Nine Heavens and the others, and bowed respectfully. "I'm Wang Luo, the holy son of the Loha Holy Sect. Thank you for saving my life." He took the initiative to introduce himself. He did not expect that the starship he saved was actually a starship of a holy sect, and there was even a holy sun on it. Hearing this, the Saint of Nine Heavens waved his hand indifferently and said, "It's nothing." With that, they were ready to leave. They were not very interested in the Loha Holy Sect. After all, they had never heard of it. However, just as they were about to leave, Wang Luo inadvertently saw Flower Fairy standing beside Xiao Chun. For a moment, Wang Luo was stunned. She felt her heart skip a beat, and her eyes were filled with infatuation. As the holy son of the fallen River Saint sect, Wang Luo naturally had many women. However, there had never been a woman who could make Wang Luo feel this way. Without the slightest doubt, Wang Luo firmly believed that the 100-Flower Fairy was the goddess of his dreams. Attracted by 100-Flower Fairy at first glance, Wang Luo suddenly called out, "Wait a minute." The sudden voice stunned Saint Jiu Xiao and the others. They all turned to look at Wang Luo. However, Wang Luo had already walked up to Flower Fairy, ignoring Xiao Chun who was beside her, and spoke in a gentle tone. "Miss, I am Wang Luo. May I know your name?" From Wang Luo's expression, how could Xiao Chun not know what this guy was thinking? But Xiao Chun did not say anything, because there was no need. Flower Fairy would say it herself. Sure enough, after Wang Luo finished speaking, Flower Fairy said indifferently, "We met by chance, so there is no need to say my name. Also, I'm already married, so I hope you will not have any improper thoughts." She did not give Wang Luo any face at all. Seeing this, Wang Luo still wanted to say something, but Chun Ling said indifferently, "If you want to die, go ahead." Obviously, everyone did not have a good impression of Wang Luo. He had saved their lives, but this guy wanted to steal Xiao Chen's woman. Although Xiao Chen was not worried that Wang Luo would cause any trouble, he was still unhappy. He did not hide the threat in his words. Hearing Chun Ling's words, Wang Luo was stunned. He was not a fool, and naturally knew the current situation. He was surrounded by Xiao Chen's people, 6 or 7 saints, Chun Ling, Chun Yu, Long Qing, Emperor Qing, and other saints and saintesses like him. Without a doubt, as long as Xiao Chen wanted to, he would not even have the chance to escape. He wisely chose to keep quiet. Seeing this, Xiao Chen glanced at him indifferently and did not say a word. He returned to his spaceship with Qin Shiru and the other 2 girls. They had saved Wang Luo and the others out of kindness, but Wang Luo's behavior made everyone unhappy. When they returned to the spaceship, Long Qing scolded with an unhappy face. "This kid really doesn't know how to appreciate kindness. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have helped." Long Qing, I'm afraid he doesn't even remember that we saved his life. Perhaps in his opinion, he didn't even need us to save him. He could have defeated the group of space bandits. Hearing Long Qing's scolding, Chen Yu said with a cheeky smile, "Wang Luo was the saint of the Fallen River Saint sect." Although they did not know the strength of the Fallen River Saint sect, since Wang Luo was the saint, he obviously would not be afraid of space bandits with only one half-step saint. Hearing Chun Yu's words, Long Qing snorted in annoyance, and then the group continued on their way. Xiao Chen's spaceship flew past Wang Luo's spaceship. Seeing the spaceship quickly disappear into the starry sky, Wang Luo did not recover from his shock for a long time. 100 Flower Fairy was the first woman to make Wang Luo so emotional. Seeing Wang Luo's infatuated face, another disciple of the Fallen River Saint sect beside him smiled flatteringly. "Senior brother Wang Luo, why don't we chase after them?" he suggested. Hearing this, Wang Luo slowly recovered from his shock, but then he shook his head. This time, Wang Luo only brought a few disciples with him, and no saints of the Fallen River Saint sect accompanied him. If he rashly chased after them, it would be troublesome if he angered Xiao Chun and the others. Wang Luo did not kill them, but he would not give up on 100 Flower Fairy so easily. She was the only woman who could make him fall in love at first sight. How could he give her up so easily? After a moment of silence, Wang Luo smiled faintly and said, "Let's go back first. This time, we have been out for a long time. Father and the others must be waiting anxiously. When we return to the sect, we can slowly inquire about this woman's identity. Anyway, there are only 3 continents nearby, so it won't be difficult to find her." Dispelling the impulse to chase after them, Wang Luo prepared to return to the Fallen River Saint sect first. As for 100 Flower Fairy, she could not escape from his hands. The 3 continents that Wang Luo mentioned were obviously the Tianqian continent, the Tiana continent, and the Northern Demon continent. Wang Luo did not expect this guy to be so familiar with this area. From this, it could be seen that the continent where the Fallen River Saint sect was located should not be far from here. As he spoke, Wang Luo and the others boarded the starship one after another. Then, they steered the starship in another direction. Unaware of Wang Luo's thoughts, Xiao Chan was currently drinking wine in the starship, while Gu Lingyao was constantly teasing 100 Flower Fairy. "Sister 100 Flower, I didn't expect you to be so charming. Just now I saw that guy was almost infatuated with you. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 9:30. Gu Lingyao teased Flower Fairy from the side. In response, Flower Fairy secretly looked at Xiao Chan with a guilty conscience. It was obvious that she was afraid that Xiao Chan would be jealous. But looking at Xiao Chen's expression, she didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Flower Fairy let out a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that Xiao Chan would be jealous. But Flower Fairy underestimated Xiao Chun too much. Xiao Chun wouldn't be jealous over such a small matter. Moreover, Flower Fairy didn't do anything wrong in this whole matter. How could Xiao Chun be jealous? But he was really unhappy with Wang Luo, but only a little. Xiao Chun wasn't at the point where he would kill someone just because of a reward. A fair lady was a gentleman's dream. It was normal for men to like beautiful women. Moreover, Xiao Chun didn't think that he would have any interaction with Wang Luo in the future. So, this small episode was quickly forgotten by Xiao Chun. But at this moment, Xiao Chun clearly didn't expect that he and Wang Luo would meet again so soon. Moreover, Wang Luo actually recklessly chased him all the way to the heavenly Qin continent. And because of this, the Fallen River Saint sect that Wang Luo belonged to became the best stepping stone for Xiao Sheng and the others to establish their new sect. It was also because of this that the new sect became famous. While drinking and chatting with Chun Ling, Longqing, and the others, Flower Fairy gently sat beside Xiao Chun and poured a cup of wine for Xiao Chun. She lowered her head and asked apprehensively, "Husband, you're not angry with me, are you?" She still wasn't sure. Hearing Flower Fairy's words, Xiao Chun laughed in his heart. This little girl was usually extremely intelligent. How could she not tell if he was angry or not? Without answering, Xiao Chun turned around and hugged Flower Fairy. Before she could react, he fiercely kissed Flower Fairy. The sudden attack and the fact that there were so many people watching, including Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue, instantly made Flower Fairy's face turn red. On the other hand, Xiao Chun smirked with satisfaction. "Do you think I'm angry or not?" Xiao Chun's kiss was enough to explain everything. Hearing this, Flower Fairy shyly scolded in a low voice. "Husband, how could you ignore you?" After saying that, Hundred Flower Fairy turned around and ran back to her room. Seeing Hundred Flower Fairy run away, the surrounding people laughed loudly. Xinyu said with a face full of envy, "If you ask me, Xiao Chun is the luckiest among us. Look at the 3 wives by Xiao Chen's side. They're all as beautiful as flowers. No wonder that Wang Luo was like this today. Haha, I can understand." Xinyu teased. Hearing this, Xiao Chun rolled his eyes at him. "If you want, you can have 3 wives and 4 concubines. I don't have any objections." As he said this, Xiao Chun secretly looked at Yi Su beside Xinyu. He couldn't help but find it funny. Xinyu was really henpecked. Yi Su was his holy servant on the surface, but she was actually Chunyu's woman. No wonder Xinyu lost his temper when he saw Yi Su. The relationship between Chunyu and Yi Su was no secret. Xiao Chun and Chunyu teased each other while the others laughed loudly. The journey to the heavenly Chan continent was easy because they didn't feel any pressure. They weren't worried about the army of demonic cultivators that might have gathered outside the heavenly Chan continent. Because they didn't feel any pressure, the journey was very easy. While Xiao Chun and the others were rushing to the heavenly Chan continent, the army of demonic cultivators from the Blood Demon continent had already surrounded the heavenly Chan continent. However, the heavenly Chan continent had a formation left behind by Elder Tian. The army of demonic cultivators from the Blood Demon continent couldn't break through it. Therefore, the saints from the Blood Demon continent had been trying to find a way to break the formation. Only by breaking the formation could they launch an attack on the heavenly Chan continent. Half-saints constantly attacked the formation of the heavenly Chan continent. This kind of continuous attack could shorten the formation's time. This was the only way the demonic cultivators could think of. Looking at the sky from the heavenly Chan continent, one could see several starships anchored in the endless starry sky. Every day, attacks fell on the formation. They couldn't remember how long this attack had been going on. As time passed, the formation of the heavenly Chan continent became more and more fragile. No one knew when it would break. In this regard, everyone on the heavenly Chan continent was worried. But at the same time, there was still a glimmer of hope in everyone's hearts. The source of this hope was Xiao Chun and the other experts who had gone to the heavenly river continent. For the sake of the heavenly river continent, Xiao Chun and the others had gone to a distant place. No one knew how their cultivation was now and whether they could successfully protect the heavenly Chan continent. But no matter what, Xiao Chun and the others were the hope of the heavenly Chan continent. Everyone on the heavenly Chan continent thought so. It was also because of this hope that the heavenly Chun continent was still considered peaceful. Everyone lived their lives step by step, ignoring the continuous attacks of the demonic cultivators outside the formation. The heavenly Chun continent was fine for the time being, but the demonic cultivators were a little anxious. They had been on the heavenly Chin continent for some time, but they still couldn't break the formation of the heavenly Chin continent. At this time, the demonic cultivators gathered on the deck of one of the starships. They looked down at the heavenly Chun continent below. One of the demonic cultivators said coldly, "This damned tortoise shell. How long will it take to break? Damn it, if this tortoise shell is broken, I will make the heavenly Chun continent bleed." Almost. Don't worry, it won't be long before this tortoise shell is broken. The heavenly Chun continent only has this much strength. They are hiding in this tortoise shell to protect themselves. But unfortunately, they don't know that no matter how hard this tortoise shell is, it will be broken one day. Another demonic cultivator said indifferently, they had been stuck in front of this tortoise shell for dozens of years, so the demonic cultivators were naturally burning with anger. But as the demonic cultivator said, no matter how hard the tortoise shell was, it would be broken one day. And as long as this tortoise shell wasn't protecting them, the heavenly Chun continent was just a duck on the chopping board. They were full of confidence and weren't afraid of the heavenly Chin continent causing any trouble. But what the demonic cultivators didn't expect was that Shao Chun and the others were already on the way. They were afraid that before they could break the tortoise shell, they would be stained with blood. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 9:31. The army of demonic cultivators attacked the formation confidently. They were confident that as long as the formation was broken, they would be able to massacre the entire heavenly Chun continent in the shortest time possible. Everyone knew that there were no saints on the heavenly Chin continent. However, there were 9 saints in the army of demonic cultivators. This kind of power was indeed enough to crush the heavenly Chin continent. However, the army of demonic cultivators obviously did not know that the heavenly Chin continent was not a sitting duck. In addition to the protection of the formation, Shao Chun and the other experts who had gone to the Tiana continent had also completed their transformations and were now rushing to the heavenly Chin continent. They did not feel the slightest sense of crisis and did not think that the heavenly Chin continent could cause any trouble. Until now, the demonic cultivators were still looking forward to the scene of them conquering the heavenly Chun continent and obtaining the origin energy. The attack on the formation did not stop. As time went by, the formation protecting the heavenly Chun continent became weaker and weaker. However, just as the army of demonic cultivators was trying their best to break the formation, a starship appeared in front of everyone on this day. This starship was none other than the one Shao Chun and the others were on. After about half a month of hurrying, Shao Chun and the others finally arrived at the heavenly Chun continent. From afar, they saw the outline of the heavenly Chun continent and the 7 or 8 blood-red starships anchored in the sky above the heavenly Chin continent. Knowing that the 7 or 8 blood-red starships belonged to the army of demonic cultivators, Shao Chun and the others were filled with killing intent. Compared to the powerlessness of the blood demon continent, Shao Chun and the others did not take the army of demonic cultivators seriously at this moment. Not to mention that Saint Danyun and the other rulers had already broken through to the Saint realm. Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors were also on this trip. In terms of strength, they were naturally far superior to the army of demonic cultivators. They were still attacking the formation continuously. At this moment, the army of Xioma cultivators had also noticed the starship Shao Chun and the others were on. Seeing this starship suddenly appear, the Xioma saints were also suspicious. Obviously, this starship was coming for them. Their speed gradually slowed down until the starship Shao Chun and the others were on slowly came to a stop in front of the army of Xioma cultivators. At the same time, several Xioma cultivators flew out of the starships on the Xioma side and stopped in front of Shao Chun and the others in no time. At a glance, there were at least several 100,000 demonic cultivators. Moreover, none of them were lower than the Tao transformation realm. It was clear that the demonic cultivators were all elites in this attack on the heavenly Chun continent. The weakest among them was at the Tao transformation realm, and there were as many as 20 or 30 half-saints. In the face of such a lineup, the heavenly Chun continent of the past would not be able to resist at all. But now, Shao Chun and the others were completely unmoved. With the appearance of the army of Xioma cultivators, 9 Saint Xioma cultivators also appeared on the battlefield. They looked at Shao Chun and the other starship from afar, and one of the Saint Xioma cultivators spoke loudly. "We are from the Blood Demon continent. May I ask where you are from?" Not knowing the identities of Shao Chun and the others, the Saint Xioma cultivators were still polite. They probably thought that Shao Chun and the others were just passers-by, so they did not want to cause trouble. Hearing this Saint Xioma cultivator's words, Shao Chun and the others on the starship all showed a cold smile. Then, Saint Mu Tian said coldly, "Let's go out and meet these Saint Xioma cultivators." After dozens of years, Saint Mu Tian and the others were no longer the same as before. They had all broken through to the Saint realm and were no longer powerless when facing the Saint Xioma cultivators. Hearing Saint Mu Tian's words, the surrounding people nodded slightly. Then, they all filed out and soon appeared in front of the army of Xioma cultivators. In terms of numbers, Shao Chun and the others were indeed far fewer than the army of Xioma cultivators, but no one was worried about this. After 8 years of fighting the Demon Clan, they were not even afraid of the real Demon Clan. So how could they be afraid of these demonic cultivators? Therefore, even though they were much smaller in number than the army of Xioma cultivators, Shao Chun and the others were still confident. In the beginning, the Saint Xioma cultivators did not recognize the people who flew out of the starship. They looked at Saint Zhou Xiao and the others in confusion. It was not until Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors appeared that the Saint Xioma cultivators finally turned pale with fright. The 9 Saint Xioma cultivators did not have much of an impression of Saint Mu Tian and the others, but Shao Sheng was still fresh in their minds. When Shao Chun appeared, the 9 Saint Xioma cultivators' expressions changed drastically. One of them even exclaimed involuntarily, Shao Sheng? How is that possible? You're not dead?" The Saint Xioma cultivators of the Blood Demon continent hated Shao Sheng the most. Twice in a row, it was Shao Sheng who stepped forward bravely and defeated the Xioma cultivators' invasion. Therefore, the Saint Xioma cultivators of the Blood Demon continent had a deep impression of Shao Sheng. They simply could not forget him. Shao Sheng, who should have died long ago, was now standing in front of them, perfectly fine. It was no wonder that the 9 Saint Xioma cultivators turned pale with fright. In the face of the Saint Xioma cultivators' expressions, Shao Sheng said with a smile, "How can I bear to die before I destroy your Blood Demon continent?" The Saint Xioma cultivators could not remain calm after hearing Shao Sheng's words. This was completely impossible. Shao Sheng should have died long ago, but he was still alive. This was impossible, absolutely impossible. They were shocked that Shao Sheng was still alive. At the same time, because of Shao Sheng's appearance, the Saint Xioma cultivators naturally guessed the purpose of this group of people. Without a doubt, Shao Chun and the others were clearly here to rescue the heavenly Qin continent. Their gazes swept across Shao Sheng, Randang Cozy Eye, Prime Saint Ice Lotus, Prime Saint Mingjia, and Saint Nine Firmaments. The Saint Xioma cultivators' expressions quickly turned grave. Yes, in terms of numbers, the Xioma cultivators had the advantage. However, in terms of Saint Xioma cultivators, Shao Chen's side clearly had an overwhelming advantage. Their expressions grew more and more solemn. They had thought that this matter was in the bag, but who would have thought that Shao Sheng was still alive and had brought back so many experts? Compared to the Xioma cultivators who turned pale with fright, Shao Chun and the others were all brimming with fighting spirit. Back then, they had been forced to leave, but now, it had completely transformed into a strong fighting spirit. Because of the invasion of the Blood Demon continent, Shao Chun and the others were forced to go to the Heavenly River continent. Now, they finally had the capital to fight against the blood demon continent. Now that they had met again, it could be said that they were enemies meeting again. Their eyes blazed with hatred. Even Saint Nine Firmaments and the others did not conceal the killing intent in their hearts. Waves of soaring aura spread out from their bodies. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 932. After decades of hard work, the powerlessness they once felt in the face of the demonic cultivators' invasion had long dissipated. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the others no longer feared the demonic cultivators because of the 8 years of bloody war with the demon clan. Thinking about it, if they didn't even fear the demon clan, how could Xiao Chun and the others be afraid of these demonic cultivators? To put it bluntly, in the eyes of the real demon clan, these demonic cultivators were like dogs. If they weren't even afraid of their masters, how could they be afraid of dogs? Far away from their hometowns and experiencing hardships in the Tiana continent, everyone wanted to have the power to protect their hometowns. Now, they finally had the power to do so. Facing the demonic cultivators again, they no longer felt powerless. Instead, they were filled with fighting spirit and killing intent. It wasn't the first time that the demonic cultivators feared the Tianshan continent. The demonic cultivators who once made everyone on the Tianshan continent nervous had now become prey waiting to be slaughtered in the eyes of Xiao Chun and the others. The Nine Heavens Saint, the Pill Cloud Saint, the Heavenly Wood Saint, and the other former rulers of the Tianshan continent all released a terrifying aura at this time. The killing intent in their eyes was undisguised. As everyone's aura spread out, Xiao Sheng's face darkened and he shouted coldly, "Everyone, let's do it. Destroy these dog-like things." They were already full of energy. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, they naturally didn't hesitate and immediately rushed toward the demonic cultivator army. Almost all of the people heading to the Heavenly Chun continent were former warriors of the Heavenly Chun continent. These people had experienced 8 years of fierce battles with the demon clan. It could be said that each of them had walked out a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Before they even made a move, the chilling aura that only appeared after experiencing the baptism of war had already caused the demonic cultivator army to change their expressions. It was hard to imagine what these people had experienced to have such a terrifying killing intent. Although they were shocked, Xiao Chun and the others obviously didn't give the demonic cultivators too much time to think. In the blink of an eye, they had already rushed to the front of the demonic cultivator army. A great battle broke out between the two armies. Their numbers were far less than the Xioma armies, but Xiao Chun and the others were not afraid at all. In terms of individual strength, the Xioma army was no match for Xiao Chun and the others. A fierce battle broke out. All kinds of martial skills appeared in the starry sky. In just one exchange, the Xioma army suffered heavy casualties. The two sides fought fiercely. At the same time, the Nine Heavens Saint and the others were also fighting fiercely with the demonic cultivators. There were indeed 1 or 2 experts among the demonic cultivators. Among the 9 demonic cultivators, 2 of them had already reached the Saint Perfection realm. Their strength was comparable to Xiao Sheng and the other 3 patriarchs. Although they had 2 ancestors, it was still not enough. At this time, the 2 ancestors of the Xioma army were being held back by Xiao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors. With the 4 besieging the 2 patriarchs, the 2 patriarchs quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Facing Xiao Sheng's group, the 2 patriarchs were simply no match for them. Unfortunately, even if they wanted to escape now, it was clearly impossible. Xiao Sheng's group simply wouldn't give them the chance to do so. The great battle in the starry sky was about to break out. At the same time, many people on the Heavenly Chun continent also noticed the battle in the starry sky. They immediately sent people to check. The answer they got was that Xiao Chun and the others had returned to the Heavenly Chun continent and were fighting fiercely with the Xioma army. Knowing that Xiao Chun and the others had returned from the Tiana continent and were fighting fiercely with the Xioma army, the people on the Heavenly Chun continent immediately became excited. In the face of the Xioma army, The people on the heavenly Chun continent had placed their hopes on Shao Chun and the others. Now that they had finally returned, the people on the heavenly Chun continent were very excited. Seeing hope, the people believed that Shao Chun and the others, who had gone to the Tiana continent to train, must have the strength to fight against the Xiaoma army. Unknowingly, the people on the Tiana continent, whether they were warriors or ordinary people, all walked out of their houses and looked up at the sky, watching the various martial skills that were constantly appearing. Shao Chun and the others were the most talented people on the heavenly Chun continent. They were also the hope of the heavenly Chun continent. They had been away for decades. Now that they had finally returned, how could they not be happy? Everyone looked at the sky with excitement. At the same time, the 7 giant forces on the heavenly Chun continent began to organize people to support Shao Chun and the others. The heavenly Chun continent was protected by a formation, but this formation could be opened from the inside. Therefore, the people on the heavenly Chun continent could open the formation to support the outside world. The 7 giant forces gathered all the warriors above the Tao Gate realm. Soon, they gathered a team of 70 to 80,000 people. Then, the Tao masters who stayed on the heavenly Chun continent opened a formation and led people to support Shao Chun and the others. The battle was still going on. Shao Chun was like a tiger in a flock of sheep, constantly reaping the lives of the Xiaoma cultivators. Facing the Xiaoma cultivators, Shao Chun naturally showed no mercy. They were the death zone of the heavenly Chun continent. They had always coveted the heavenly Chun continent. Now that they met, they would naturally kill without mercy. Along the way, the ink dragon sword in his hand had long been dyed red with blood. Up until now, the number of Xiaoma cultivators who had died at Shao Chun's hands had reached several hundred. Almost all the Xiaoma cultivators below the Tao Master realm were no match for Shao Chun. He could kill them with a single strike. Shao Chun's bravery quickly attracted the attention of the Tao emperors on the Xiaoma cultivators' side. Of course, it was not only Shao Chun. Chen Yu, the Qing emperor, Hu Fei, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others were the same. At this moment, a Tao emperor cultivator hurriedly rushed towards Shao Chun and quickly blocked Shao Chun's path. He wasn't afraid at all when facing a Tao emperor cultivator. On the other hand, the Tao emperor cultivator had an extremely solemn expression. He'd already noticed Shao Chun earlier. Shao Chun had attained perfection in the Tao Exalt realm at such a young age, and his strength was terrifying. To be honest, this Tao emperor cultivator actually didn't want to go against Shao Chun, but he had no other choice. If he didn't stop Shao Chun, then the army of Xiaoma cultivators would be completely finished. He was extremely fearful of Shao Chun, yet there was nothing he couldn't retreat from. The Tao Emperor cultivator took a deep breath and shouted coldly, "Human die." As he spoke, the Tao Emperor cultivator took the initiative to attack. Shao Chun didn't dodge when he saw this, and he directly slashed with his sword. The two of them were quickly locked in battle. These Xiaoma cultivators had stopped treating themselves as humans since a long time ago. As they fought intensely, Shao Chun spoke indifferently. For the sake of strength, all of you gave up your identity as humans. But in the end, do all of you think your strength is very strong? You're still just ants. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. End of this chapter. Chapter 9:33. All of you gave up your identity as a human for the sake of strength. But in the end, do all of you think you're very strong? You're still just ants. Shao Chun spoke indifferently. Besides hatred, Shao Chun felt even more disdain towards these devil cultivators. These people had given up their pride as humans for the sake of strength. Unfortunately, they didn't understand that even if they'd given up their identity as humans for the sake of strength and were willing to serve the devil race, what had they obtained in the end? They had obtained nothing. Were devil cultivators really stronger than humans in terms of strength? Not necessarily. Even the true devil race was unable to defeat the human race, let alone these fellows who'd abandoned themselves and were willing to serve as the lackeys of the human race. As far as Shao Chun was concerned, The thing that these devil cultivators had abandoned was the thing that every single one of them should be most proud of, and it was being born as a human. Unfortunately, even if they'd abandoned the pride in their hearts, they were still completely useless in the end. The devil cultivator's face sank when he heard Shao Chun, and it was like the scar in his heart had been torn open. A strand of humiliation caused him to burn with rage, and his attacks grew even more ferocious. At the same time, he was unable to restrain his rage as he spoke furiously. "Human, you're courting death. Die." "Human? Then may I ask what you are now?" "You're neither human nor devil. There isn't a single race in the world that can accept devil cultivators like you. You've abandoned the pride of being born as a human. It's all of you who'll die today." Shao Chun laughed coldly when he heard this, and then he slashed with Ink Dragon Jian E and executed the 9 thunderclap swords. As soon as he struck, the tip of his sword struck towards the devil cultivator like a bolt of lightning. The devil cultivator didn't dare hesitate when facing Shao Chun's sword strike, and he chose to dodge at the first possible moment. It was difficult to imagine why Shao Chun's attack would be so terrifying when he was only at the perfection stage of the Tao Exalt realm. Even though he possessed the cultivation at the Tao Emperor realm, he still had no choice but to be careful when facing Shao Chun, because the slightest carelessness might cause him to be heavily injured by Shao Chun. Shao Chun was not discouraged by the fact that his attack had failed to hit the demonic cultivator. He brandished the Ink Dragon sword in his hand, and streaks of lightning-like sword edges crisscrossed, whistling as they attacked the demonic cultivator. The two of them fought intensely without end, yet this Tao Emperor Realm Devil Cultivator seemed to have fallen into a disadvantaged position at this moment. When facing Shao Chun's attacks, he could only exhaust himself and choose to dodge. While Shao Chun was fighting fiercely with the demonic cultivator, the reinforcements from the 7 superpowers from the Tianshan continent finally arrived at the battlefield. Seeing Saint Jiuxiao and the others fighting fiercely with the demonic cultivator, the warriors from the 7 superpowers were all very excited. They couldn't sense the cultivation levels of the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds and the others, but they didn't need to fight. If they could fight against the saints of the continent of the 9 clouds, and even gain the upper hand, it meant that the saints of the continent of the 9 clouds had broken through to the saint layer. Everyone killed them all. The saints of the 9 clouds and the others had finally broken through to the saint layer. This was definitely the best stimulant for the warriors of the 7 superpowers. For a moment, the reinforcements formed by the 7 superpowers roared and charged toward the demonic cultivators. They had been sullen for long enough. For a long time, the demonic cultivators had been like a sharp sword hanging over the heads of the Tianshan continent. They had always been on tenterhooks. Now that the rulers of the Tianshan continent had returned, the anger in their hearts completely erupted. One by one, they attacked the army of demonic cultivators without any regard for their lives. The demonic cultivators, who were already in a disadvantageous position, faced the reinforcements formed by the 7 superpowers of the Tianshan continent. For a moment, the situation of the demonic cultivators became even more precarious. It couldn't be helped. Although Shao Chun and the others who had rushed back from the Tiana continent were few in number, every single one of them was terrifyingly powerful. Especially Chun Yu, Chun Ling, and the others. Their strength was unimaginable. At this moment, besides facing Shao Chun and the others, they still had to face the reinforcements of the Tianshan continent. For a moment, the demonic cultivators were retreating in defeat. On the other hand, the Tianshan continent's forces pursued the demonic cultivators with the momentum of wanting to kill them all. The reinforcements of the 7 superpowers were like the last straw that broke the camel's back. It made the defeat of the demonic cultivators obvious. At the same time, the battle between Shao Chun and the Tao Emperor Realm demonic cultivator was coming to an end. Under Shao Chun's repeated attacks, the Tao Emperor Realm demonic cultivator was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He had already been struck several times by Shao Chun's sword. His injuries weren't light, and blood was flowing out from his wounds. He was already powerless to persist any longer. At the same time, The Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator's eyes were filled with bewilderment when he saw the army of demonic cultivators retreating in defeat. At this moment, the Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator was thinking. It was clearly a battle where victory was in our grasp. So why did it suddenly become like this? The Tiantian continent, that was supposed to be a turtle in a jar, had suddenly beaten the army of demonic cultivators to the point of retreating in defeat. All of this happened in an instant. The army of demonic cultivators that was originally filled with confidence had already been pushed to the edge of a cliff. As he gazed at the demonic cultivators that were ceaselessly howling and being slaughtered, the Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator couldn't help but recall what Shao Chun had said earlier. For the sake of strength, all of them were willing to give up their identity as humans, and they thought that they could rely on this to obtain strength comparable to the devil race. But in the end, what did they obtain? Did they really obtain that so-called formidable strength? Obviously, they didn't. If they really obtained formidable strength, then how could they possibly be in such a situation now? His eyes were filled with bewilderment. At the same time, Shao Chun walked slowly over to the Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator, and as he gazed at the Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator who'd already aroused resistance, Shao Chun spoke slowly. Your so-called formidable strength is actually only wishful thinking. If the devil race was really so formidable, then how could our human race still stand proudly in the world? Even the devil race that all of you worship doesn't possess the ability to annihilate the human race. In this way, do all of you really think that the devil race's strength is stronger than the human race? All of you think that you can obtain formidable strength. Yet little do you know that the thing all of you gave up is the thing that the human race should be most proud of. The human race has stood proudly in the world for a myriad of years, and no matter if it's the devil race, the god race, or the beast race, none of them were able to annihilate the human race. How laughable! All of you actually think that the human race is weaker than the devil race. Shao Chun felt that the choice of these demonic cultivators was laughable and lamentable. As soon as he finished speaking, Shao Chun didn't even wait for this Tao Emperor Realm Demonic Cultivator to reply before he swung his sword, and this demonic cultivator's head flew into the sky. After he killed this demonic cultivator, Shao Chun continued forward. There was no need to show mercy to demonic cultivators because they were a group of pitiful and detestable people. They weren't humans any longer, so there was naturally no need to show mercy to them. Begging to be collected, begging to be recommended. End of this chapter. Chapter 9:34. After killing the Tao Emperor stage demonic cultivator, Shao Chun didn't stop and continued to kill his way forward. The demonic cultivator army, which was already on the verge of defeat, didn't have much strength to resist the heavenly Chun continent's counterattack. Only the 9 demonic cultivator saints were still bitterly holding on. However, from the looks of it, it was clear that they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Putting everything else aside, the 2 demonic cultivator ancestors had already been forced into a desperate situation by Shao Shung's group of 4, and their injuries were constantly worsening. Besieged by Shao Shung's group of 4, the 2 demonic cultivator ancestors had already used all their trump cards. They had even used the Great Demonic Body. The Great Demonic Body was a top-notch bloodline ability unique to the Demon Clan. Through the cultivation method of the Demon Clan, the demonic cultivators had also evolved a great demonic body that belonged to them. However, demonic cultivators didn't possess the bloodline of the Demon Clan after all, so the great demonic body they used was simply a joke in the eyes of Shao Shung's group. They only became much taller and stronger, and their skin turned greenish-black. However, there were no wings on their backs like when they used the great demonic body. In the eyes of Shao Shung's group, the great demonic body the demonic cultivators used only made them look more like the Demon Clan. It was far too different from the real great demonic body. Of course, after using the great demonic body, the demonic cultivator's strength and speed had indeed increased, but that was all. At this moment, Shao Chun and Randang Kozii had joined forces to kill one of the demonic cultivator ancestors. Randang Cozy Eye looked at the demonic cultivator ancestor who had used the great demonic body with disdain. You call this the great demonic body? It's simply a joke. You're neither a human nor a ghost. Randang Cozy Eye was obviously very disdainful of the great demonic body. Hearing this, the demonic cultivator ancestor flew into a rage. However, because his injuries were too severe, he couldn't do anything. He could only run for his life to avoid the attacks of Xiao Sheng and Randang Cozy Eye. The great demonic body was a divine ability that demonic cultivators yearn for the most. In their opinion, only by learning the great demonic body could they be considered to have truly obtained the power of the demon clan. But they didn't know that the great demonic body in their eyes was not even half of the demonic body's power. What a joke! For the sake of such a nondescript great devil body, a devil cultivator could even give up his identity as a human. In the end, he made himself neither human nor ghost. Xiaoxing didn't care about the angry glare of the demonic cultivator patriarch at all. He spoke faintly after ancient sage Randang finished speaking. Randang, stop fooling around. Get rid of them as soon as possible. He urged Randang Cozy Eye to attack with all his strength. Don't waste any more time. Victory was already in their hands against the demonic cultivators, but the longer they delayed, the heavier the price the Tianqian continent would have to pay. Xiao Sheng didn't want more people to die in this battle, so he wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. In fact, there was nothing to worry about in this battle, as long as there weren't too many casualties. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Randang Cozy Eye stopped smiling and attacked more fiercely. At the same time, Xiao Sheng didn't dare to show weakness. The two of them attacked the demonic cultivator ancestor with all their strength. To be honest, although they were both ancestors, the strength of these two demonic cultivators was obviously weaker than the real ancestors of the demon clan, such as Xiaolu. Therefore, from the beginning of the battle until now, Xiao Sheng and Randang Cozy Eye had killed the demonic cultivator ancestor in less than an hour. Killing an ancestor in less than an hour was absolutely terrifying. Even though Xiao Chun and Randang Cozy Eye worked together, it could only be said that the demonic cultivator ancestor was too weak to kill an ancestor in such a short time. The death of an ancestor quickly caused a rain of blood to fall in the starry sky. At the same time, the demonic cultivator's morale suffered a great blow. The demonic cultivator's army, which was already on the verge of defeat, began to flee. From being full of confidence to fleeing, the whole process only took more than an hour. However, the people of the heavenly Chan continent didn't allow these demonic cultivators to flee. They charged at the demonic cultivators as if they had been injected with chicken blood, constantly killing these demonic cultivators who had lost their will to fight. The battle gradually became one-sided. After killing one of the ancestors, Xiao Chun and Randang Cozy Eye didn't take sides and immediately joined the battle between Prime Saint Ice Lotus and Prime Saint Mingjia. The four of them worked together to kill the last demonic cultivator ancestor. When facing Prime Saint Ice Lotus and Prime Saint Mingjia, the demonic cultivator ancestor was already at a disadvantage. Now that Xiao Sheng and Randang Cozy Eye had joined the battle, the demonic cultivator ancestor couldn't hold on any longer. After a quarter of an hour, the demonic cultivator ancestor fell. In less than 2 hours, the two ancestors of the demonic cultivators were killed. Xiao Sheng and the others also had time to help the Nine Heaven Saint and the others and continue to kill the other saints of the demonic cultivators. It could be said that victory was already decided. With the death of the two demonic cultivators, the demonic cultivators were powerless to reverse the situation. There was no doubt that they would be defeated. The demonic cultivator army, which was originally full of confidence and prepared to take down the heavenly Chun continent in one fell swoop, had now become a target of scorn. They could only cover their heads and flee. All of this happened too quickly. With the appearance of Xiao Chun and the others, the demonic cultivators fell from heaven to hell. With the death of the two demonic cultivators, their confidence of victory completely collapsed. And this was only the beginning. After the death of the two demonic cultivator ancestors, The demonic cultivator saints were killed one by one in the following battle. There was no other way. Letting Shao Sheng and the other three free up was absolutely a nightmare for the demonic cultivators. The demonic cultivator saints fell one by one. After several hours, the 9 demonic cultivator saints were all killed. Saint Nine Heavens, Shao Sheng, and the others also joined the battle below. With the addition of the demonic cultivators, the demonic cultivator army's defeat sped up again. Even escaping became an extravagant hope. When the demonic cultivators attacked, swathes of demonic cultivators fell with every strike. It was like squashing ants. The demonic cultivator army had no power to resist at all. It felt as if they were facing heavenly punishment. They were simply powerless to resist. The miserable screams of the heavenly Chun continent had now completely turned into the wails of the demonic cultivators. These demonic cultivators were extremely terrified. However, the demonic cultivators did not show any mercy. This time, the heavenly Qin continent was determined to eliminate the demonic cultivators in one fell swoop. Not only the demonic cultivator army present, but the heavenly Qin continent would also send people to the blood demon continent in the future to eliminate all the demonic cultivators there. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 9:35. The ancestors and saints of the demonic cultivators had been killed one after another. The remnants of the demonic cultivator army couldn't resist the attacks of Shao Sheng and the other ancestors and saints at all. For a time, hundreds of thousands of demonic cultivators fled in all directions in the starry sky outside the heavenly Qin continent. What greeted them was the merciless slaughter of the people of the heavenly Chun continent. Some demonic cultivators wanted to flee back to the starships and escape by starships. Unfortunately, Shao Sheng and the others had already thought of this and destroyed all the starships of the demonic cultivators. The starships of the demonic cultivators were destroyed one after another before the defensive formation could be activated. Without the starships, the demonic cultivators were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The battle was still going on. Although it was called a battle, it was actually a one-sided massacre. The demonic cultivators had no intention to fight at all. They only wanted to escape. Perhaps even now, they still could not figure out how they ended up like this. In the eyes of the demonic cultivators, the heavenly Chun continent was just a piece of cake. Moreover, in order to take down the heavenly Chun continent in one fell swoop, the demonic cultivators had gathered all the elite warriors. Although there were less than 1 million of them, the weakest among them was at the Dao transformation realm. There were also countless Dao King and Dao sovereign realm experts. With such a force, it was almost a piece of cake for them to destroy the small heavenly Chun continent. However, although the idea was beautiful, the reality gave the demonic cultivators a hard slap in the face. Since the appearance of Shao Chun and the others, the demonic cultivators were doomed to be defeated. The demonic cultivators of the blood demon continent were indeed stronger than those of the heavenly Qin continent. However, compared to the Tenna continent, the blood demon continent was much, much weaker. Moreover, after 8 years of fierce battle with the northern demon continent, Shao Chun and the others no longer had the slightest fear of the demonic cultivators. Therefore, the defeat of the demonic cultivators was not surprising. The massacre continued. The oppression that the people of the heavenly Chun continent had been suppressing for the past few decades was completely unleashed at this moment. The army of demonic cultivators that once hung over everyone's heads like a sharp jian, he had now become the target of slaughter. No one tried to stop such a massacre. Gradually, Shao Sheng and the others stopped attacking because the remaining demonic cultivators were no longer worth their time. After the Saint Devil cultivators fell successively, all the half-saints and Dao emperors in the Devil cultivator army were annihilated. Presently, the strongest amongst the remaining Devil cultivators was only at the Dao sovereign realm, and they didn't pose any threat to the cultivators of the heavenly Chun continent any longer. So, Shao Chun and the other ancestors and saints didn't make a move and allowed everyone to kill the remaining devil cultivators. Blood dyed the starry sky. At this moment, the devil cultivators knew fear and the helplessness of being slaughtered. They used to view the heavenly Chan continent as a stretch, but now that they had changed their roles, they had become a stretch in the eyes of the cultivators of the heavenly Chin continent. The massacre lasted for 2 days. In the end, the army of nearly 1 million devil cultivators was almost completely annihilated. Even if there were some lucky survivors, there were no more than 10,000 of them. Moreover, without starships, it was difficult for these devil cultivators to survive in the starry sky, let alone return to the Blood Demon continent. Moreover, even if they returned to the Blood Demon continent, so what? Soon, the Heavenly Chun continent would send an army to destroy the Blood Demon continent in one fell swoop and completely eradicate the devil cultivators on the Blood Demon continent. This was a battle that made everyone feel proud and elated. Everyone understood that after this battle, the Heavenly Chin continent would no longer have to worry about the devil cultivators coveting it. When the battle ended, the cultivators of the Heavenly Chun continent burst into thunderous cheers. Shao Chun, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Qin Shu, Gudua, Huangfu Ao, the Nine Heaven Saint, the Heavenly Pill Saint, and the others were surrounded by many cultivators of the Heavenly Chun continent. They all knew that the reason why the Heavenly Chin continent was able to escape danger and even defeat the Devil Cultivator army was all because of Shao Chun and the others who went to the Heavenly River continent. Once, Shao Chun and the others went to the Heavenly River continent to gain experience for the sake of the Heavenly Chin continent. After dozens of years, Shao Chun and the others succeeded. Each of their strength had undergone a transformation, which was why they were able to defeat the Devil Cultivator army in one fell swoop. Cheers shook the heavens. Then, because the Devil Cultivator army was defeated, the array that sealed the Heavenly Chun continent naturally lost its function. It was closed from the inside by the people of the 7 major forces. Then, everyone slowly returned to the Heavenly Chun continent. Finally, they returned to the Heavenly Chin continent. For Shao Chun and the others who were originally from the Heavenly Chun continent, this time they felt as if they had returned home. For Randang Cozy Eye, Prime Saint Ice Lotus, Prime Saint Mangjia, Chun Yu, Qing Emperor, and the others from the Heavenly River continent, there was no doubt that they were full of curiosity about the Heavenly Chin continent. Along the way, Chun Yu and the others looked around. Chun Yu kept pestering Shao Chun, asking Shao Chun to take them on a tour of the Heavenly Chin continent. In fact, in terms of size, the Heavenly Chun continent was smaller than a province of the Heavenly River continent. But there was no other way. It was the first time Chun Yu and the others had left the Heavenly River continent. They were completely unfamiliar with the Heavenly Chun continent, so naturally, they wanted to travel. Facing Chun Yu's pleading eyes, Shao Chun smiled bitterly and said, "I say, Senior Brother Chun Yu, even if you want to travel, you have to settle down first." They had just returned to the Heavenly Chun continent, so there were still many things to deal with. Naturally, there was no time to take Chun Yu and the others on a tour. Hearing this, Chun Yu smiled embarrassedly. Of course, but after settling down, Shao Chun, you can't go back on your words. You have to take us on a tour of the Heavenly Chun continent. Okay. Hearing this, Shao Chun nodded repeatedly. The group went directly to the 9 Firmaments Palace in the Central Divine Domain. Then, the experts from the 7 overlords of the Heavenly Chun continent gathered at the 9 Firmaments Palace. Shao Chun and the others were naturally arranged to stay in the 9 Firmaments Palace, including Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue. Without the covetous eyes of the demonic cultivators, everyone in the Heavenly Chun continent was in a good mood. In the next few days, the Heavenly Chun continent could be said to be in a celebratory mood. Regardless of whether it was cultivators or ordinary people, chickens and goats could be seen everywhere. People sang and danced and reveled every night. Everyone in the Heavenly Chun continent was celebrating. Banquets could be seen everywhere. Of course, The most lively place was naturally the Nine Firmaments Palace. In the next few days, all the famous experts in the heavenly Chun continent had arrived at the Nine Firmaments Palace. In response, Xiao Sheng, Randang Kozii, and the other old ancestors decided to hold a banquet at the Nine Firmaments Palace. They invited the experts of the various great families and sects of the heavenly Chun continent to gather together, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 9:36. Nine Firmaments Palace had invited every reputable character in the heavenly Qin mainland. When news of this spread out, countless people rushed over like a flock of ducks. For a time, Nine Firmaments Palace became extraordinarily lively. Every day, many people would rush over to Nine Firmaments Palace to participate in the banquet. For the experts from the various great families and sects, this banquet was a symbol of their status. However, for Xiao Sheng and the others, this banquet was not as simple as just drinking wine. Bluntly speaking, the reason for this banquet was so that everyone in the heavenly Chun mainland could get to know Xiao Sheng and the other three patriarchs. Secondly, it was to establish a new sect. It had to be said that the new sect would be established by combining the forces of both the heavenly river mainland and the heavenly Qin mainland. Due to this, the establishment of a new sect would require a period of time for the cultivators from the two mainlands to get used to each other. This was unavoidable. However, Xiao Sheng and the others were not worried about this. The establishment of the new sect was imperative. Additionally, Saint Heavenly Firmaments and the others had agreed to establish the new sect. Thus, there should not be too much resistance. Days passed. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed since Xiao Chun and the others arrived in the heavenly Qin mainland. During these 10 days, Xiao Chun was able to relax. He spent all his time with his parents and Qin Shiru. Chun Yu and the others came to look for Xiao Chun several times. They wanted Xiao Chun to take them out for a stroll. However, without exception, they were all rejected by Xiao Chun. What a joke. It had not been easy for them to return to the heavenly Chun mainland. Xiao Chun would rather spend the time with his family. As for Chun Yu and the others, Xiao Chun simply found 2 disciples from Nine Firmaments Palace to take them out for a stroll. At any rate, given their strength, they would not encounter any danger in the heavenly Chun mainland. There was no need to worry. In his former residence in Nine Firmaments Palace, Xiao Chun enjoyed a rare moment of tranquility. The date for the banquet had been set. It would be held in 5 days. On this day, as usual, Xiao Chun was lying on a bamboo chair in the courtyard, surrounded by Qin Shiru and the other 2 women. The 4 of them were chatting and laughing. Big brother Xiao Chun, I also want to go to the heavenly Chun continent to take a look. When are we leaving? It was also Gu Lingyao's first time in the heavenly Chun continent. She was also very curious, but she did not go with Chun Yu and the others. Instead, she stayed by Xiao Chen's side. Upon hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen knew that this girl was a little bored. He smiled and said, "Let's wait for the banquet to end. The ancestors specially invited us to attend this banquet. It's not good to leave now." Knowing that this little girl wanted to go to various places in the heavenly Chun continent, Xiao Chun said with a smile. Hearing that, Gu Lingyao did not say anything else. Right after Xiao Chun said that, one of the Nine Firmaments Palace disciples who had accompanied Xiao Chen's group of 4 to sightsee rushed in. He quickly moved to stand before Xiao Chun and bowed respectfully. "Senior brother Xiao Chun, something has happened." Facing Xiao Chun, the disciple was clearly very nervous. There was nothing he could do about it. Although he was of the same generation as Xiao Chun, their statuses were as different as heaven and earth. If it were not for the fact that it was an emergency, the disciple would not have dared to boldly ask Xiao Chun for help. Seeing the respectful expression on the disciple's face, Xiao Chun immediately guessed that something had happened to Chun Yu and the others. His face remained unchanged as he asked the disciple, "Did something happen to senior brother Chun Yu and the others?" As expected, Xiao Chen's guess was correct. Hearing that, the disciple nodded his head heavily. Seeing that, Xiao Chun continued asking. What happened? Just say it. Senior brother Xiao Chun. We were originally bringing senior brother Chinyu and the others to Mount Heavenly Duke for sightseeing. However, who would have thought that we would encounter the eldest young master of the Qin family? The eldest young master of the Qin family is an arrogant, hedonistic young master who uses the name of the Qin family to throw his weight around. When he saw senior brother Chunyu and the others sitting in the pavilion atop Mount Heavenly Duke, the eldest young master of the Qin family chased them away, and a conflict broke out between the two sides. Hesitantly, the disciple gave a brief account of what had happened. Hearing that, Xiao Chun could roughly guess what had happened. Mount Heavenly Duke was a famous scenic spot in the divine region of the heavenly Qin continent. There was nothing special about it other than its beautiful scenery. Not only were there white clouds swirling around Mount Heavenly Duke, there were also lush greenery and hundreds of flowers blooming on the mountain. Additionally, the entire Mount Heavenly Duke was like a work of God. Thus, it was named Mount Heavenly Duke. Due to the beautiful scenery of Mount Heavenly Duke, many people from the heavenly Qin continent would visit Mount Heavenly Duke for sightseeing. That was especially true for some young masters and young ladies with extraordinary statuses. However, the best place for sightseeing on Mount Heavenly Duke was the pavilion atop the mountain. Chunyu's group of 4 and young Master Qin had gotten into a conflict over the pavilion. Considering the personalities of Chunyu and the others, it was only natural that they would not give young Master Qin any face. Thus, it was not surprising that a conflict would arise. There was not much concern on Xiao Chen's face. Given the strength of Chunyu's group of 4, a mere young Master Qin would not be able to gain much of an advantage over them. After a moment of silence, Xiao Chen asked, "How is young Master Qin now? Is he dead?" Chunyu's group of 4 would surely be fine. If anything were to happen to them, it would be young Master Qin. Hearing Xiao Chen's question, the disciple answered truthfully. He is not dead. However, his cultivation base was crippled by senior brother Jiangyu. The Qin family has already received the news. They have probably sent their men over. His cultivation base was crippled by Jiangyu. It would appear that young Master Qin had truly angered Chunyu and the others. Otherwise, Jiangyu would not have dealt with him so heavily. After pondering it for a moment, Xiao Chun came to the same conclusion. The reason why the disciple had rushed back in such a hurry was likely because of young Master Qin's high status. Given the strength of Chunyu's group, there was no need for them to fear the Qin family. However, recklessly killing someone was not a good thing. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Chun slowly got up. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "I will be making a trip to Mount Heavenly Duke. There is no need for you to worry about this." He knew that even if he did not go, nothing would happen to Chunyu's group of 4. However, after considering it for a moment, he decided that it would be better for him to go. At any rate, Chunyu's group of 4 were not from heavenly Qin mainland. If they were to recklessly take action against the Qin family, it would inevitably affect the establishment of their new sect. Compared to Chunyu's group of 4, Xiao Chun did not face this problem. Xiao Chun was a native of heavenly Qin mainland. Additionally, he possessed quite the prestige there. If the Qin family truly did not know the meaning of death, Xiao Chun could be exterminated. No one in heavenly Qin mainland would say anything about it. It would not affect the establishment of their new sect. Seeing that Xiao Chun was planning to personally make a trip to Mount Heavenly Duke, the disciple hesitated. "Senior brother Xiao Chun, the Qin family has been," the disciple stammered. Judging by his words, it would appear that he wanted to tell Xiao Chun that the Qin family was not to be underestimated. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. In a chapter. Chapter 9:37. Seeing that this disciple was stuttering for a long time without even saying a complete sentence, Xiao Chun chuckled and said, "You don't have to be like this. If you have something to say, just say it." He didn't know why this disciple was so nervous. Although Xiao Chun hadn't heard of a big family with the surname Qin in Tianqian continent. Even if there was, so what? With Xiao Chen's current strength and status, there was no one in Tianqian continent that could make him afraid. A Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, the disciple glanced at Qin Shiru from time to time. After hesitating for a while, he finally mustered up the courage to speak. Senior brother Xiao Chun, this Qin family, is senior sister Qin Shuru's family. The Qin family was Qin Shuru's family. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun was stunned. Not only Xiao Chun, but even Qin Shuru was stunned. For a moment, Xiao Chun didn't know what to say. If it was any other family, the worst that could happen was to wipe them out. However, this was Qin Shuru's family. This matter was depressing. They couldn't just wipe out the Qin family, right? After all, the Qin family was considered part of Xiao Chen's family. After all, Xiao Chun was the Qin family's son-in-law. He didn't expect that the Qin clan was actually Qin Shuru's clan. It was no wonder that this disciple had been stammering and couldn't say anything for a long time. It was also no wonder that he would rush back to find him in such a hurry. That made sense. Against most families, Chun Yu's group of 4 in 9 Firmament Palace would be able to crush them. However, when it came to the Qin family, it was a different story. Once the Qin family was involved, it was the same as involving Xiao Chun. Thus, the disciple had rushed over to meet up with Xiao Chun. Speaking of which, the Qin family had indeed been developing rapidly in recent years. From a small family in the Eastern Sun region, they had risen to become one of the top families in the heavenly Chun continent. In terms of strength, the Qin family was second only to 9 Firmaments Palace, one of the 7 overlords. Of course, the strength of the Qin family was not due to the strength of the members of the Qin family. The reason why the Qin family was only second to the 7 overlords was because they had a group of extremely powerful guardians. In the end, the reason why these guardians were willing to serve the Qin family was because of Xiao Chun. It could be said that the rapid rise of the Qin family had something to do with Xiao Chun. If not for the fact that Qin Shiru was Xiao Chen's woman, the Qin family would never have been able to rise so quickly. Perhaps it was due to this rapid rise that some of the members of the Qin family had become arrogant and haughty, looking down on everyone else. It was like a beggar suddenly becoming a tycoon. That feeling of reaching the heavens in a single bound was enough to cause a drastic change in a person's character. Sighing helplessly, Xiao Chun then turned to Qin Shiru. Seeing that, Qin Shiru asked the disciple with a grim face, "Who is the current head of the Qin family?" "It's Qin Feng," the disciple answered truthfully in the face of Qin Shiru's question. Hearing the name Qin Feng, Qin Shiru's face turned even uglier to behold. Qin Feng was the younger brother of Qin Shiru's father, Qin Shiru. He could be considered as Qin Shiru's uncle. They did not expect Qin Feng to be the head of the Qin family. After asking around, they found out that the reason Qin Lai was no longer the head of the Qin family was because Qin Lai had joined 9 Firmaments Palace and become an elder there. He devoted himself to cultivation and basically ignored the matters of the Qin family. Qin Lai was not forced to give up his position. Rather, he gave up his position as the head of the Qin family. Perhaps it was because Qin Lai gave up his position that the Qin family became what it was today. Qin Shi knew his uncle Qin Feng's temper all too well. To put it bluntly, Qin Feng was a useless piece of trash. Now, with Xiao Chen's banner, the Qin family had become one of the top families in the heavenly Qin continent. As such, given Qin Feng's temper, it was only natural for him to become arrogant. After learning about the changes in the Qin family, Qin Shiru said coolly, "If so, then the so-called young Master Qin is Qin Yuming." Qin Yuming, Qin Feng's only son, could be considered Qin Shiru's younger cousin. Hearing this, the disciple nodded his head. After getting a general understanding of the Qin family situation, Qin Shiru turned to Xiao Chun and said apologetically, "Husband, the fact that the Qin family was using Xiao Chen's banner to run amok made Qin Shiru feel both angry and ashamed. He felt that his family had shamed Xiao Chun. However, Xiao Chun did not care about this. In Xiao Chen's mind, Qin Shiru was Qin Shiru, and the Qin family was the Qin family. They were two different things. Besides, Qin Shiru did not know about these things. Therefore, before Qin Shiru could say anything, Xiao Chen interrupted him. All right, it's not your fault. Let's go. We'll go to Mount Tiangong to have a look. Ling Yao, haven't you been clamoring to go out and play? I'll take you to the place with the best scenery in the heavenly Chun continent. What do you think? Sure, sure, Gu Ling Yao replied happily. Xiao Chun gestured to Qin Shiru not to take it to heart. After saying that, he led the three women out of Nine Firmament's palace and rushed towards Mount Tiangong. Along the way, thanks to Xiao Chen's comforting words, Qin Shiru gradually opened his mind. The guilt he felt towards Xiao Chun also quickly dissipated. Although he no longer felt guilty towards Xiao Chun, the anger in his heart only grew. In Qin Shiru's opinion, he must teach his uncle and cousin a lesson this time. Otherwise, the Qin family would become a malignant tumor in the heavenly Qin continent. After thinking about that, Qin Shiru turned to Xiao Chun and said, "Husband, can you promise me one thing?" "What is it?" "There is no need for the two of us to be so courteous. If there is anything, just say it," Xiao Chun replied with a chuckle. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Qin Shiru said, "Husband, can you leave the matter of the Qin family to me? Don't interfere." He wanted Xiao Chun to not interfere with the matters of the Qin family. Qin Shiru wanted to deal with it himself. Hearing that, Xiao Chun agreed without hesitation. He was not afraid that Qin Shiru would protect the Qin family indiscriminately. Xiao Chun knew Qin Shiru's character all too well. Thus, Xiao Chun was not worried about leaving this matter to Qin Shiru. Seeing Xiao Chun nod in agreement, Qin Shiru revealed a rare smile. Then he took the initiative to pull Xiao Chun, and the two of them rushed towards Mount Tiangong. Behind them, Fairy Bai Hua and Gu Ling Yao could not help but snicker. It was very rare to see Qin Shiru take the initiative. The group quickly made their way towards Mount Tiangong. As Mount Tiangong was not too far away from Nine Firmament's palace, and Xiao Chen's group was moving very quickly, it only took them 15 minutes to arrive at Mount Tiangong. They could not be bothered to climb the mountain. Instead, they simply flew up to the top of the mountain, begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 9:38. They flew all the way to the top of the Heaven Duke Mountain. Just as Xiao Chun and the other three arrived at the top of the mountain, they saw a young man dressed in luxurious clothes lying outside the pavilion at the top of the Heavenly Palace Mountain. However, this young man's face was very pale, and there was not the slightest fluctuation of spiritual power in him. Clearly, this person was none other than Qin Yuming, whose cultivation base had been crippled by Jiangyu. Seeing Qin Shiru's miserable state, Qin Shiru's eyes flashed with reluctance. Xiao Chun, who was beside him, was keenly aware of the change in Qin Shiru's expression. However, he did not say anything. Qin Yuming was Qin Shiru's cousin. After all, now that his cultivation base had been crippled and he had become a cripple, it was normal for Qin Shiru to feel sorry for him. However, what could Xiao Chun say about this? He could not possibly cripple Jiangyu just because of Qin Yuming, could he? Moreover, at the end of the day, Qin Yuming was the one who sought death by provoking Chun Yu's group of four. They slowly landed outside the pavilion on top of Heaven Duke Mountain. Following the appearance of Xiao Chen's group of four, the Nine Firmament's palace disciple who had been accompanying them in the pavilion immediately came out to greet them. Senior brother Xiao Chen, knowing what the disciple wanted to say, Xiao Chun waved his hand and said coolly, "I know what happened. I will deal with it." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the disciple nodded his head. After that, Xiao Chun glanced at Qin Yuming, who was lying on the ground. Ignoring him, he stepped into the pavilion and smiled at Chun Yu's group of four. "I say, senior brother Jiangyu, you have really given me a difficult problem. What is it?" "Junior brother, Xiao, knows this person?" Jiangyu asked with a puzzled look. Naturally, he did not know about the relationship between Qin Yuming and Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun did not stand on ceremony with the four of them. He went straight to the stone bench in the pavilion and sat down. Looking at the puzzled Jiangyu, he smiled wryly and said, "Speaking of which, this person is my brother-in-law. He is Shui Ro's cousin." He told Jiangyu about Qin Yuming's identity. Hearing that, Jiang Yu's expression became somewhat complicated. He did not expect Qin Yuming, whose cultivation base was crippled by him, to be Xiao Qin's brother-in-law and Qin Shuru's cousin. For a moment, Jiang Yu did not know what to say. Jiang Yu remained silent. Instead, it was Chun Yu who spoke up to smooth things over. That, junior brother Xiao, you can't blame junior brother Jiang for this matter. We were the ones who arrived at the pavilion first, but this brat wanted to chase us away as soon as he arrived. His words were very vulgar. Moreover, if you want to talk about fighting, it was this brat who started it first. Chun Yu's words were true. However, Xiao Chun did not know it was Qin Yuming who attacked first. Hearing Chun Yu's words, Xiao Qin's mouth unconsciously twitched. This was great. Qin Yuming could only blame himself for being unlucky. Facing Chun Yu's group of 4, he actually dared to recklessly attack first. If this was not courting death, then what was? Xiao Chun was completely speechless towards this brother-in-law of his. It was rare for a person to court death to such an extent. Thus, how could Xiao Chun blame Jiang Yu? He could not let Jiang Yu stand there and not fight back. Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Xiao Chun poured himself a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. He smiled at Chun Yu's group of 4. Well, we don't need to care about this matter. Since it's Shui Rou's family, let Shui Rou handle it. It's rare to see such beautiful scenery on Mount Tiangong. Let's not talk about these troublesome matters. Good wine paired with beautiful scenery is a great joy in life. Xiao Chun did not blame Jiang Yu, nor did he blame Qin Yuming. Instead, he chose to ignore them. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Emperor Qing also laughed heartily. Junior brother Xiao is right. The scenery on Mount Tiangong is indeed rare. I have been in the Tiana continent for decades. I don't dare to say too much, but I have traveled to all 4 continents of the Tiana continent. However, I have never seen a place with scenery comparable to Mount Tiangong. With such beautiful scenery paired with such good wine, we brothers will drink until we are drunk today. With Xiao Chun, Emperor Qing, and Chun Yu's active activities, the 5 of them quickly stopped worrying about Qin Yuming's matter. While Xiao Chun was drinking with Jiang Yu and the other 3, outside the pavilion, Qin Shuru had already arrived in front of Qin Yuming, accompanied by Baiwa Fairy and Guling Yao. Seeing his sister come, Qin Yuming, who was originally like a dead dog, immediately seemed to come back to life. He crawled in front of Qin Shuru and hugged Qin Shuru's right leg, crying and begging with a sorrowful expression. Cousin, you have to make a decision for me. My cultivation has been destroyed. From now on, I'm a cripple. Qin Yuming, a dignified man, was crying so miserably at this moment. Seeing Qin Yuming's appearance, Qin Shuru's eyes became even more furious. In Qin Shuru's opinion, Qin Yuming was simply a disgrace. As the saying goes, men do not cry easily. Looking at Qin Yuming now, he was crying more miserably than a woman. Kicking Qin Yuming away, Qin Shuru said with a cold face, "Shut up." After being scolded by Qin Shuru, Qin Yuming immediately shut his mouth. Next, Qin Shuru asked Qin Yuming about what had happened. Naturally, Qin Yuming exaggerated his story. According to Qin Yuming, the bad guys were Jiang Yu and the other 3 while he became a victim. Naturally, Qin Shuru knew that Qin Yuming was lying. Thus, he called over the 9 Firmament's Palace disciple beside him and asked him to tell him what had happened. As expected, the disciple's version of events was completely different from Qin Yuming's version of events. When he heard that Qin Yuming was the one who made the first move, Qin Shuru was left speechless. Qin Shuru could not blame the pitiful Qin Yuming. Looking at him, Qin Shuru shouted coldly, "Come, follow me to apologize to junior brother Jiang Yu." Apologize? Cousin, are you sure you're not mistaken? My cultivation base was crippled by him. You want me to apologize? Hearing that, Qin Yuming said with a look of disbelief, "Do you think I shouldn't? You're the one who has a death wish. Besides, given senior brother Jiang Yu's status, even if he kills you, your death will be in vain." Enough nonsense. Follow me, Qin Shuru said. Ignoring whether Qin Yuming was willing or not, Qin Shuru grabbed him and walked towards the pavilion. After arriving at the pavilion, Qin Shi ordered Qin Yuming to unwillingly apologize to Jiang Yu. Qin Shi knew that the hatred in Qin Yuming's heart had yet to dissipate. However, Jiang Yu did not mind. As for Xiao Chun, he was also very cold towards his brother-in-law. It was not difficult to see Qin Yuming's character. Xiao Chun despised people like him. If it weren't for the fact that Qin Yuming was Qin Shiru's cousin, Qin Yuming would not even be qualified to stand before him, let alone talk to him. After sending Qin Yuming away with just a few words, Qin Shiru turned to Xiao Chun and said, "Husband, I'll bring him back first. I'll also check on the Qin family's current situation. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 9:39. Qin Shi wanted to bring Qin Yuming back to the Qin family first. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded and said, "All right, let Baiwa go with you. She could take care of you on the way." He asked Baiwa Fairy to accompany Qin Shi back. Qin Shi did not refuse. The three of them left, but Gu Lingyao stayed behind. The little girl was obviously very fond of the scenery of Mount Tiangong. She surrounded Xiao Chun and chattered happily. Since returning to the heavenly Chun continent, Xiao Chun had not brought Gu Lingyao anywhere to play. Seeing the little girl jumping around happily, Xiao Chun also smiled. The few of them drank wine in the pavilion. With Gu Lingyao by their side, they laughed and chatted happily. Coupled with the beautiful scenery of Mount Tiangong, everyone's mood quickly improved. As for Qin Yuming's matter, it was directly thrown to the back of their minds. Xiao Chun and the others drank to their heart's content. On the other side, Qin Shiru and Baiwa Fairy brought Qin Yuming all the way to Qin City, where the Qin family was located. Qin City was a city specially built by the Qin family in the Central Divine Realm. It could be considered the Qin family's current headquarters. Thinking about it, a small family that could only hide in the Eastern Sun region could build a city in the Central Divine Realm in just a few decades. One could imagine the Qin family's current development. In comparison, Xiao Qin's Xiao family was still living in seclusion in the Eastern Sun region's Lingshan Commandery. Compared to the arrogance of the Qin family, the Xiao family was undoubtedly low-key. At the same time, it was also because of this low-key that the Xiao family was full of mystery. In the past, many of the Xiao family's direct descendants had benefited from the power of the bloodline. Although they did not activate the divine bloodline, their talents had increased a lot. With such talents, the Xiao family's development over the years naturally did not disappoint. Moreover, unlike the Qin family, the Xiao family's strength was true strength, unlike the Qin family, which relied on those consecrators to become strong. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the current Xiao clan was as strong as the seven overlords, excluding Saint Jiu Xiao and the others. Even so, the Xiao clan didn't reveal their true strength. Most of the time, when the disciples of the Xiao clan went out to gain experience, they weren't as arrogant as the Qin clan. Perhaps this was the difference between the Nouveau Riche and the Divine clan. The Xiao family never deliberately showed their strength. Of course, if anyone dared to provoke them, they naturally knew the consequences. Of course, along the way, he was to die to the family's fairy. He had just narrowly escaped death, but now he had already started coveting the beauty of the 100-flower fairy. Previously, Qin Yuming was nervous and did not notice the 100-flower fairy. Now that Qin Shiru was leading the way, Qin Yuming inadvertently saw the 100-flower fairy's appearance. With just one glance, he was completely attracted by the 100-flower fairy's beautiful face. His gaze could no longer move away from the 100-flower fairy. At the same time, the bestial desire in his eyes could not be concealed, as if he wanted to eat the 100-flower fairy in one bite. Sensing Qin Yuming's gaze, the 100-flower fairy's eyes flashed coldly. She turned her head and said coldly, "If you don't want to die, you'd better put away that look." To be honest, if it were not for Qin Shiru, Qin Yuming would be a dead man now. He even dared to covet the 100-flower fairy, who was his brother-in-law's woman in name. He really did not know what was good for him. Regarding this, Qin Shiru was furious and gave Qin Yuming a merciless slap. Qin Shiru was extremely disappointed with his cousin's changes over the years. Moreover, this guy was really too bold. He even dared to covet the 100-flower fairy. If Xiao Chen knew about this, Qin Shiru would definitely kill him, even if Qin Shiru personally pleaded for mercy. After being taught a lesson by Qin Shiru, Qin Yuming became much more well-behaved and did not dare to think about anything else. The three of them arrived at the Qin city. The Qin city was not large. After all, there were only the Qin clan members in the city. There were also some servants and consecrators living in the city. They directly entered the Qin city and arrived at the Qin clan's mansion. The Qin clan's mansion was extremely large and could be said to be extremely luxurious. However, Qin Shiru was very disgusted by such extravagance. With a grim face, Qin Shiru strode into the main hall of the Qin clan's mansion. Upon hearing that Qin Shiru had returned, the members of the Qin clan quickly came out to welcome him. The two leading figures were two middle-aged men with similar appearances. One of them was the current patriarch of the Qin clan, Qin Shiru's uncle, Qin Feng. The other one was Qin Shiru's uncle, Qin Shan. Compared to Qin Feng's arrogance, Qin Shan had been a well-behaved person since he was young. Additionally, he also had a somewhat dull personality. That was something that could be clearly seen from the two of them. "Oh, Shuei-ro, you're finally back. I was thinking about going to Nine Firmament's palace to visit you in a few days' time." Seeing Qin Shiru walking over, Qin Feng stepped forward with a smile on his face. Qin Shan, who was beside him, did not say anything. He simply smiled and nodded at Qin Shiru. The two brothers also revealed smiles on their faces. However, Qin Feng's smile was more of a fawning one, while Qin Shan's smile was more of a sincere one. Perhaps it was because of Qin Yuming, but Qin Shiru instinctively felt disgusted with his uncle, Qin Feng. Thus, he ignored Qin Feng. Instead, he nodded at Qin Shan before walking into the main hall of the Qin clan's mansion. Everyone from the Qin clan had gathered in the main hall of the Qin clan. Qin Shiru sat on the main seat, while 100-flower fairy sat beside him. Qin Shiru glanced at the members of the Qin clan and said coolly, "Yoming's matter ends here. He brought this upon himself." Qin Shiru did not beat around the bush. However, hearing that, Qin Feng and his wife grew displeased. Qin Feng said, "Shuei-ro, no matter what, Yuming is still your little brother. Now that his cultivation base has been crippled, you want us to just let it go? If so, what will happen to our Qin clan's face?" Qin Feng disagreed. Qin Shiru said coldly, "Face? Are you talking about the Qin clan's face or the face of my husband, Xiao Chen? It seems that our Qin clan has indeed done a lot of evil things in the name of my husband. Uncle, as the head of the Qin clan, don't you feel sorry for it?" Looking at these family members who used to be familiar with him, it was as if they had all changed into different people. They had all become arrogant and did not put anyone in their eyes. It was as if the Qin clan was the boss of the Tianqian continent. However, they did not know that the Qin clan was only where it was today because of Xiao Chen. To destroy the Qin clan, to put it bluntly, it only took one sentence from Xiao Chen. It was ridiculous that the members of the Qin clan still did not understand this. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 940. Looking at the familiar faces in front of him, Qin Shiru only felt that the current Qin family was so unfamiliar. Many of the members of the Qin family had changed, and their faces were involuntarily filled with arrogance. The anger in his heart could not help but rise. Sitting beside Qin Shiru, 100-flower fairy was also filled with helplessness towards the members of the Qin family. It seemed that the Qin family had indeed changed too much. Of course, some people had changed, but there were also people who still stuck to their original hearts. It was just that there were very few of them. Take Qin Shan, for example. In the face of the Qin family's meteoric rise, Qin Shan was still the same as before. There was not much change in Qin Shan. He still gave people the impression that he was humble, courteous, and honest. When he stood next to his younger brother, Qin Feng, The difference between the two was immediately apparent. Look at Qin Feng. From top to bottom, his clothes were incomparably luxurious. The rings and bracelets on his hands, and even his hairband, were shining with golden light. In comparison, Qin Shan only wore a simple green robe. He did not have any accessories on him. He was simple and elegant. He was far from Qin Feng, who looked like a nouveau riche. With a gloomy expression, Qin Shiru shouted angrily. In the face of Qin Shiru's angry shout, even Qin Feng did not dare to say anything. Although Qin Shiru was a junior, her identity was different. Just her identity as Xiao Qin's wife alone was enough to make Qin Feng not dare to act rashly in front of Qin Shiru. With a gloomy expression, Qin Feng shut his mouth and sat back down on his seat. As for Qin Feng's wife, she hugged Qin Yuming with tears on her face and whispered something to him. She was probably comforting him. He did not like this uncle of his, but what could Qin Shiru do? After all, he was his biological uncle. After taking a deep look at Qin Shiru withdrew his gaze. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he asked, "Where's Uncle Fu? Why don't I see him?" The Uncle Fu that Qin Shiru mentioned was the old housekeeper of the Qin family. It could be said that he had watched Qin Shiru grow up. Qin Shiru had a deep affection for Uncle Fu. But today Uncle Fu was not present, so Qin Shiru asked curiously. However, it would have been better if they hadn't asked. The moment Qin Shiru said that, everyone's expression changed drastically. They lowered their heads and didn't say anything. They didn't dare to look at Qin Shiru. "Uncle." Qin Feng was startled when he heard Qin Shiru's question. It was a long while later before he recovered and said with a guilty smile, "Uncle Fu went to the Eastern Sun region for some matters. He will only be back after some time." While speaking, Qin Feng did not dare to look Qin Shiru in the eyes. Looking at Qin Feng's expression, Qin Shiru was sure that this guy was talking. The coldness in his eyes intensified. But to everyone's surprise, Qin Shan, who had been silent all this while, stepped forward and spoke. "Third brother, how can some things be hidden? Since you dare to do it, why don't you dare to admit it?" Qin Shan suddenly spoke. Hearing his words, Qin Feng's face sank. He glared at Qin Shan and snarled. "Qin Shan, you..." Clearly, there was an inside story. However, Qin Shan ignored Qin Feng's cold rebuke this time. Instead, he turned to look at Qin Shiru and said with a complicated expression, "Shiru, Uncle Fu has been locked up by your third uncle. Fu Bo didn't even leave the Qin mansion. Instead, he was locked up by Qin Feng. As for the reason, it was because Fu Bo couldn't stand Qin Yuming's actions and had angered Qin Yuming. After which, he was locked up by Qin Feng in the dungeon. Qin Yuming had been a lecherous person all these years. Whenever he fancied a woman, he would use various methods to forcefully bring her back to the Qin residence. Not only did Qin Feng not reprimand him, he even set aside an area in the backyard of the Qin residence and built a harem for Qin Yuming. It was specially used to lock up and watch over the women who were forcefully brought back by Qin Yuming. To our young Master Qin, kidnapping women was a common occurrence. Uncle Fu really couldn't stand it anymore, which was why he angered Qin Yuming and Qin Feng. Hearing that Qin Feng had locked Uncle Fu in the dungeon, Qin Shiru's originally ice-cold expression became even more unsightly. An icy aura unconsciously spread out from his body. In an instant, the temperature in the main hall dropped by quite a bit. Feeling the icy spiritual energy spreading out from Qin Shiru's body, everyone in the Qin family trembled with fear. Qin Shiru coldly looked at Qin Feng, then turned to Qin Shan and said, "Uncle, bring me to the dungeon." Hearing Qin Shiru's words, Qin Shan did not say anything. He nodded and brought Qin Shiru to the Qin residence's dungeon. However, Qin Feng did not follow them. In the dark and damp dungeon, Qin Shiru saw Uncle Fu. Seeing that Uncle Fu had aged a lot, Qin Shiru said softly, "Uncle Fu, you..." Young miss, you're finally back. This is great. The Qin family is saved." Seeing Qin Shiru, Uncle Fu spoke emotionally. Ignoring his weak body, he struggled to stand up and spoke with a sorrowful expression. "Young miss, third master is not suitable to be the patriarch. All these years, the Qin family has been ruined by him. Uncle Fu recounted everything that Qin Shiru had done over the years, including how Qin Yuming had forcefully snatched women and built a residence to imprison these women for his pleasure. Hearing Uncle Fu's narration, Qin Shiru's heart trembled violently. He originally thought that the Qin family had only been a little arrogant over the years. He did not expect that the Qin family had done so many outrageous things. The anger in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Even Hundred Flower Fairy, who was standing beside him, revealed a murderous intent. However, she sighed and said, "Young miss, we can't let them go this time. Sister, even though we're family, we can't show any mercy this time. If the Qin family continues like this, we won't be far from destruction. At that time, I'm afraid our husband will personally take action." Hearing Hundred Flower Fairy's words, Qin Shiru took a deep breath. He knew that Hundred Flower Fairy was right. Qin Shiru nodded slightly and said, "Young miss, don't worry. I know what to do. Third uncle is indeed not suitable to be the patriarch of the Qin family anymore." Originally, Qin Shiru only wanted to reprimand third uncle so that he could restrain the Qin family in the future. But now, it seemed that the Qin family could no longer be changed. The poison had already seeped into their bones. Only by scraping off their bones and treating the poison could the Qin family change. Qin Shiru looked at Qin Shan and said with a hint of reproach in her voice, "Eldest uncle, all these years you've just watched third uncle run amok without doing anything?" Being reprimanded by Qin Shiru, Qin Shan said with some shame, "Shiru, you know eldest uncle's character. I don't want to fight for anything. Moreover, all these years, your third uncle's words have been the law in the Qin family. What can I do even if I say anything?" Qin Shan had always been aloof from worldly affairs. It was not that he did not reprimand Qin Feng, but what was the use of saying anything? Qin Feng did not listen at all. So in the end, Qin Shan simply did not care about the Qin family's matters and focused on living his own life. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 941. Qin Shiru was indeed somewhat dissatisfied with Qin Shan, but he also understood that his uncle's temperament was somewhat weak. Naturally, he would not be able to keep Qin Feng in check by himself. Qin Shiru had initially been disappointed with the Qin family, but now he was furious. It was hard to imagine that the Qin family would do such a thing. Those innocent women were captured by Qin Yuming and imprisoned in the Qin family's backyard. Moreover, Qin Yuming treated these women as his playthings. Almost every few days, someone would be tortured to death by Qin Yuming. Moreover, what made Qin Shiru even angrier was that Qin Feng would also play with these women. Sometimes, the father and son would even play with the same woman at the same time. This was simply perverted. They were worse than beasts. Just as Flower Fairy had said, he could no longer be soft-hearted towards the Qin family. Otherwise, the Qin family would not be far from being destroyed. Xiao Chen was still unaware of these things. With Xiao Chen's personality, Qin Shiru had no doubt that once Xiao Chen knew about these things, no one would be able to save the Qin family, including Qin Shiru himself. In the face of such a major issue, Xiao Chen would definitely not care about Qin Shiru's feelings. Therefore, in order to save the Qin family, he had to first get rid of the black sheep, Qin Feng and Qin Shan, in exchange for a glimmer of hope for the Qin family. In Qin Shiru's heart, he did not expect the Qin family to be powerful. As long as his family could be safe and happy, that was enough. However, the Qin family had completely changed. It had changed so much that Qin Shiru almost could not recognize it. After reprimanding Qin Shan, Qin Shiru turned around and held Flower Fairy's hand. He said with a pleading expression, "Sister, don't tell husband about this. Let me handle it myself. Okay?" "Okay." Hearing this, Hundred Flower Fairy nodded. Qin Shiru returned to the main hall with Uncle Fu and Qin Shan after knowing what the Qin clan had done all these years. At this moment, the members of the Qin clan were still gathered in the main hall. However, Qin Shi didn't know that when she and Qin Shan were heading to the dungeon, Qin Feng had already made his preparations. Qin Feng was not stupid. He knew that after Qin Shi met Uncle Fu would definitely tell him everything. And Qin Shi, who had obtained everything, would at least abolish his position as the head of the family. Qin Feng did not want to be captured without putting up a fight. Therefore, during the time when Qin Shi was away, Qin Feng had arranged dozens of men of sacrifice around the main hall, hoping to fight against Qin Shi. He was unwilling to lose his position as the head of the family. Over the years, Qin Feng had thoroughly tasted the sweetness of power. Every time he went out, everyone would call him the head of the Qin clan, which made Qin Feng feel relaxed and happy. Qin Feng was unwilling to lose his position as the head of the family. He had already fallen into madness, which was why Qin Feng had done such a crazy thing in order to use his men of sacrifice to deal with Qin Shi and then protect his position as the head of the family. Qin Feng even dared to lay his hands on Qin Shi for the sake of the patriarch position. Of course, Qin Shi didn't know about this. She walked all the way back to the main hall. However, when she stepped into the main hall, Flower Fairy sensed something and revealed a cold smile. She didn't say anything and sat down with Qin Shi on the main seat. After all, Flower Fairy wasn't a member of the Qin clan, and Qin Shi was here, so she didn't say anything. At this time, Qin Shi brought Uncle Fu to the main hall and shouted coldly at Qin Feng. "Third uncle, I don't think I need to say anything more. Let me ask you about what you've done over the years. Are you worthy of the ancestors of the Qin clan?" Turning back, Qin Shi's anger had turned into killing intent. He looked at Qin Feng with a murderous look. Feeling this murderous look, Qin Feng couldn't help but feel his heart beat wildly. However, he still braced himself and stood up. "True, I don't know what third uncle did wrong." At this point, it was too early for Qin Feng to continue quibbling. Qin Shi was furious to the extreme when facing this, and she laughed. "All right, since it's like that, Uncle Fu, tell me everything third uncle has done during these years." Hearing Qin Shi's words, Uncle Fu didn't hesitate and immediately told him everything that Qin Feng had done over the years. Listening to Uncle Fu's narration, the murderous look in Qin Shi's eyes became more and more intense. He couldn't wait to kill his third uncle. He was worse than a pig or a dog. Even if he was worse than a pig or a dog, he wouldn't have done what Qin Feng had done. Faced with Uncle Fu's accusations, Qin Feng's face gradually darkened. He knew that he had no other choice. He could either give up the position of the clan head or fight Qin Shi with all his might. He didn't say anything and just listened to Uncle Fu's accusations. After a while, when Uncle Fu finished speaking, Qin Shi finally spoke. "Third uncle, do you have anything else to say? So what do you plan to do now?" Perhaps because he was forced into a corner and had no other way out, Qin Feng simply made up his mind. He looked straight into Qin Shi's eyes and said coldly. Qin Shi also noticed the change in Qin Feng, but he didn't care about it now. Suppressing the murderous look in his heart, Qin Shi said coldly, "Since third uncle has nothing to say, then I announce that from today onwards, Qin Feng's position as the clan head and his lineage's cultivation will be abolished, and he will be expelled from the Qin clan." In the end, Qin Shi's heart softened. He didn't kill Qin Feng, but he did abolish Qin Feng's position as the clan head. After doing so many things that angered the heavens and the people, Qin Feng definitely couldn't be the clan head of the Qin clan anymore. Moreover, Qin Shi also wanted to abolish the cultivation of everyone in Qin Feng's lineage and expel them from the Qin clan. Hearing Qin Shi's words, the expressions of the Qin clansmen from Qin Feng's line changed greatly. And it was also at this moment that Qin Feng, who had unknowingly walked to the center of the main hall, suddenly burst into wild laughter. "Huh, abolish my position as the clan head? Abolish the cultivation of everyone in my lineage and expel them from the clan? Qin Shi, who do you think you're killing? Since when did you have a right to criticize the Qin clan? You're just a junior." Hearing Qin Feng's laughter, Qin Shi said in a deep voice, It's not up to you to decide whether I have the right or not. Qin Feng, I don't want to talk nonsense with you. Do you want to do it yourself? Or do you want me to do it? Qin Shiru was completely disappointed with Qin Feng. Now, he didn't even call him third uncle, but directly called him by his name. No matter what, Qin Shiru had to do this today. Sparing Qin Feng's life was already Qin Shiru's bottom line. However, Qin Feng didn't seem to appreciate Qin Shiru's soft-heartedness. Hearing Qin Shiru's words, Qin Feng's eyes flashed with a touch of determination and madness. Then he shouted coldly, "Qin Shiru, don't go too far. It's not up to you to criticize the Qin clan. Today, you want to abolish my position as the clan head? Wishful thinking." At this point, they had already shed all pretense of cordiality. Following Qin Shiru's words, dozens of black-clothed martial artists holding weapons rushed in from outside the main hall. They surrounded Qin Feng and protected him in the middle. Each and every one of them stared coldly at Qin Shiru, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 942. These dozens of black-clothed warriors with weapons in their hands were the men of sacrifice that Qin Feng had raised over the years. At this time, these people firmly protected Qin Feng in the middle and looked at Qin Shiru coldly. Originally, they had planned to spare Qin Feng's life and only cripple his cultivation and expel him from the Qin family. But who would have thought that Qin Feng would be so crazy and want to attack Qin Shiru? Facing Qin Feng's stubborn resistance, the killing intent in Qin Shiru's eyes intensified. Beside him, Flower Fairy still had a faint smile on her face. In fact, Flower Fairy had already sensed the existence of these men of sacrifice just now, but she didn't say anything. Now that these men of sacrifice had appeared, Flower Fairy said to Qin Shiru, "Sister, if you can't bear to do it, I can do it for you." In Flower Fairy's view, it was obviously difficult for Qin Shiru to kill Qin Feng and the others. But judging from Qin Feng's actions, this person indeed deserved to die. Now that he was stubbornly resisting, Qin Shiru had no reason to let Qin Feng go. Knowing that it was difficult for Qin Shiru to kill Qin Feng, after all, he was her uncle, Flower Fairy took the initiative to speak. Hearing this, a hint of struggle flashed across Qin Shiru's eyes, but it was only for a moment. She then nodded slightly and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, sister." With that, Qin Shiru got up, took one last look at Qin Feng, and then disappeared from the main hall in a flash. Qin Feng didn't understand Qin Shiru's current strength. He only thought that Qin Shiru was still the little girl from back then. Little did he know that over the years in the Tiana continent, Qin Shiru had already changed. Therefore, when she wanted to leave, Qin Shiru had already disappeared from the main hall before Qin Feng and the others could even react, let alone stop her. It was no exaggeration to say that Qin Feng's choice to stubbornly resist Qin Shiru to the end was really thinking too much. Not to mention relying on the dozens of death attendants in front of him. Even if he gathered the power of the entire Qin family, Qin Feng could not do anything to Qin Shiru. As Qin Shiru left, Flower Fairy waved her hand, and the door to the main hall was tightly shut. At the same time, Flower Fairy stood up and said with a faint smile on her face, "Those who are not from Qin Feng's faction, step forward. Otherwise, don't blame me if you accidentally injure them." The people of the Qin family present were not from Qin Feng's faction. After hearing Flower Fairy's words, they quickly divided into two camps. Although the people of the Qin family didn't know how strong Flower Fairy was, they obviously didn't want to participate in this matter. Seeing that everyone obediently separated from Qin Feng's faction, Flower Fairy smiled slightly. At the same time, Qin Feng coldly shouted, "Pretending to be mysterious. Who are you, little girl? You don't deserve to interfere in the affairs of the Qin family." Qin Feng didn't think that Flower Fairy was very strong. After all, Flower Fairy was still too young. However, following his words, Flower Fairy's figure instantly disappeared. No one saw Flower Fairy's movements clearly, but when she reappeared, she was already in front of a man of sacrifice. She slapped out and hit the man's chest, shattering his heart meridians. She killed a man with a single slap. These men of sacrifice, trained by Qin Feng, were indeed loyal to him, but their cultivation was too low. Basically, they were only in the Dao Gate realm. In Flower Fairy's eyes, such cultivation was really not enough. Even if there were hundreds of people, Flower Fairy wouldn't care about them, let alone dozens of people. As for Qin Feng, whether it was Flower Fairy or Qin Shu, they didn't care about him at all. However, the laughing Qin Feng didn't have the slightest self-awareness, thinking that he could compete with Qin Shiru. Seeing that Flower Fairy directly chose to attack, and her movement technique was extremely fast, along with the death of this man of sacrifice, Qin Feng's face instantly turned gloomy. He didn't expect Flower Fairy to have such strength, but it was too late to say anything now. Without giving Qin Feng any time to think, Flower Fairy shuttled through the crowd, and with every strike, someone fell. Qin Feng's men of sacrifice were no match for Flower Fairy at all. They didn't expect this unbelievably beautiful woman to have such terrifying strength. In front of her, Qin Feng's people were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. In just a short time, Qin Feng's men of sacrifice were all killed, leaving only Qin Feng's people trembling in fear. It was as if they had encountered the most terrifying thing in the world. Even Qin Feng himself didn't expect that the men of sacrifice that he had spent so many years and countless resources to train would be so easily killed by Flower Fairy. Seeing Flower Fairy approaching step by step, Qin Feng's wife's face was already pale. She screamed as if she had seen a ghost. "Don't come over." She was scared, really scared. However, Flower Fairy turned a deaf ear to Qin Feng's wife's screams. Her figure moved, and she directly swept towards Qin Feng's people. They didn't have the strength to fight back at all. Soon, the main hall returned to peace. However, at this moment, the main hall was littered with nearly 100 corpses. Qin Feng's people were all killed by Flower Fairy, including Qin Yuming. Looking at Qin Feng's corpse on the ground, the rest of the Qin family sucked in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect that Flower Fairy, who was as beautiful as a fairy, would be so ruthless. When she killed Qin Feng's people, she didn't have the slightest hesitation. Qin Feng's people were completely annihilated. Perhaps even until the end, Qin Feng didn't expect that his strength would be so weak in front of Flower Fairy. After doing all this, Flower Fairy's expression didn't change. She elegantly walked out of the main hall. With Qin Feng's death, the rest of the matters would naturally be handled by Qin Shiru. She slowly walked out of the main hall. Outside the main hall, Flower Fairy saw Qin Shiru at a glance. Obviously, she had been waiting here all this time. At this moment, seeing Flower Fairy walk out of the main hall, Qin Shiru naturally knew that Qin Feng's people were finished. His face revealed a somewhat forced smile. "Thank you, sister." Knowing that Qin Shiru was in a bad mood, Flower Fairy stepped forward and held Qin Shiru's hand, comforting him with a gentle tone. "Sister, if you want the Qin family to live for a long time, there is no other way. Some malignant tumors must be ruthlessly removed. If you don't stop them, they will only cause more trouble. Sister, you must understand this principle." "Sister, don't worry. I understand." Hearing this, Qin Shiru nodded. He knew that Flower Fairy's words weren't wrong. Qin Feng's people must be eradicated. Otherwise, the Qin family will be destroyed by his hands one day. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 943. He felt extremely grateful towards Fairy Baiwa. Although Fairy Baiwa had killed off everyone from Qin Shiru's faction, Qin Shiru knew very well that Fairy Baiwa had only done so to avoid making things difficult for Qin Shiru. For that reason, Fairy Baiwa was willing to be the bad guy. At any rate, Fairy Baiwa did not care what others thought of her. In this world, the only person she cared about was Xiao Chun. After destroying Qin Feng's faction, the following matters became much simpler. Qin Shiru simply announced that Qin Shan would succeed the position of patriarch of the Qin family. Truth be told, Qin Shan's personality was not suitable for the position of patriarch. However, there was no other choice. At present, besides Qin Shan, no one else was qualified to be the patriarch of the Qin family. Additionally, despite Qin Shan's cowardly personality, he was much more honest compared to Qin Feng. As such, while Qin Shan might not be able to lead the Qin family to a great development, he could at least ensure the safety of the Qin family. This was what Qin Shi wanted to see the most. She did not ask for the Qin family to become strong. She only hoped that the members of the Qin family could live in peace. Naturally, if there were any outstanding disciples amongst the younger generation of the Qin family, Qin Shi would definitely arrange for them to join the new sect that he was about to establish. Without the obstruction of Qin Feng's faction, Qin Shan smoothly ascended to the position of patriarch. After that, he stayed in the Qin family for another day. Only then did Qin Shi and Fairy Baiwa return to Nine Firmament's palace. Earlier, Xiao Chun had already sent a message to Qin Shi, telling him to return to Nine Firmament's palace directly. They had already left Heavenly Duke Mountain. The change in the Qin family did not attract too much attention. As for Qin Shan's succession to the position of family head, it was done in a low-key manner. As such, outsiders were unaware of the change in the Qin family. At that very moment, everyone in the Heavenly Qin mainland was focused on Nine Firmament's palace. All the famous characters in the Heavenly Qin mainland were gathered there. They safely returned to Nine Firmament's palace. After meeting up with Xiao Chun, Qin Shi did not hide anything from her. He told her everything about the Qin family. Xiao Chun did not say anything about that. She simply pulled Qin Shi into her embrace and said softly, "Brother, you are the one with the Qin family. Don't think too much about it. There are always black sheep in every big family. Just get rid of them." He did not blame Qin Shi. On the contrary, he comforted him. To Xiao Chun, the Qin family was not worth his attention, let alone Qin Feng. She hinted at Qin Shi not to think too much about it. Now that Qin Feng's bloodline had been eliminated, the Qin family would be better off in the future. After being comforted by Xiao Chun, Qin Shi snuggled into Xiao Chen's embrace and nodded slightly. In the next few days, as the banquet was about to begin, Xiao Chun and the others did not go out. However, there was an endless stream of people coming to visit them every day. Almost all the experts from the various big families and sects came to visit Xiao Chun. It cannot be helped. These people knew very well that in the Heavenly Chun mainland, you could ignore other people. However, you could not ignore Xiao Chun. He was a monstrous character who had left behind too many legends. Although Xiao Chun was still young, his deeds had been widely spread in the Heavenly Chun mainland. Everything about Xiao Chun was talked about enthusiastically. With so many people coming to visit, Xiao Chun naturally could not meet all of them. Other than some people who he could not refuse, Xiao Chun left the others to Qing Yao and Qing Luo. It was indeed somewhat belittling to let the maids receive the experts from all over the Heavenly Chun mainland. However, no one dared to show any dissatisfaction. On the contrary, even when facing Qing Yao, Qing Luo, and the other maids of Xiao Chun, these important figures were all respectful. They did not dare to treat the 6 women as maids. After interacting with these important figures every day, Qing Yao, Qing Luo, and Qing Yao's temperament gradually changed. If they were not Xiao Chen's maids, no one would be able to tell. From the way they talked and their temperament, it was impossible to associate them with maids. The 6 women gradually matured. Not only did they do a good job in taking care of Xiao Chun and the others, but they were also fully competent in other matters. Xiao Chun was naturally happy about this. Therefore, Xiao Chun was very assured to leave these matters to the 6 women. With Qing Yao, Qing Luo, and Qing Luo helping him deal with the experts from the various large clans and sects, Xiao Chun was free. However, during this period, people from the Xiao clan naturally came to visit Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun naturally had to personally greet the people from the Xiao clan. Not only Xiao Chun, but even Xiao Qing also showed up. After returning to the Heavenly Chun mainland, Xiao Chun and his family had not had the time to visit the current Xiao clan. However, after chatting for a while, Shao Chun and his father knew that the current Shao clan had undergone a complete transformation. The glory of the sacred clan was also slowly recovering. Shao Chun and Shao Qing were very gratified by the growth of the Shao clan. After all, the Shao clan was their root. It did not take long for the day of the banquet to arrive. On this day, countless wooden seats had been set up on the Heavenly Sword Peak that was once Nine Firmaments Palace's Heavenly Sword Peak, from the foot of the mountain all the way to its summit. The Sky Sword Peak was the location of the banquet this time. Many people came. No matter who they were, they all wanted to attend this banquet. Based on their status and cultivation, there were people seated from the foot of the mountain to the peak of the mountain. Of course, the closer one was to the peak of the mountain, the higher one's status was. However, there were very few people who could sit at the peak of the mountain for this banquet. Only Shao Sheng and the other patriarchs, Shao Chun, Chun Ling, and the other holy sons and holy daughters, as well as the Nine Firmament Saint and other Sage Realm experts. Even Qin Shiru and the other two girls were not qualified to sit at the peak of the mountain. They were slightly behind Shao Chun and the others. On the peak of the mountain, there were a total of more than 10 tables and chairs. Among them, Shao Sheng and the other three naturally sat at the main seats. On the left side of the 4 seats were the Nine Firmament Saint and the other holy sons and holy daughters, while on the right side were Shao Chun and the other holy sons and holy daughters. Below them were Qin Shiru and the other 2 girls, as well as Gudawuya and the others, as well as those who had gone to the Tiana continent to train with them. According to their status and cultivation, they lined up at the foot of the mountain. When the banquet began, the entire Sky Sword Peak was completely lively. Everyone drank and chatted. During the banquet, beautiful maids shuttled back and forth between the banquet, constantly serving food and wine to everyone. The atmosphere was very lively. However, in addition to chatting, everyone's eyes were fixed on the peak of the mountain. Everyone knew that the person on the peak of the mountain would be the master of the Tianshan continent from now on. At the same time, everyone was very curious about the identity of Randang Kozii and the other 2 who were sitting at the main seats. They had never seen them before. The people of the Tianshan continent had an impression of Shao Sheng. However, they did not know anything about Randang Kozii and the other 2. However, since they were able to stand side by side with Shao Sheng, they were obviously not ordinary people. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 944. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Shao Sheng's group of 4 at the top of the mountain. It was undeniable that the 4 of them were the true protagonists of the banquet. Even though the 4 of them had only been drinking quietly since the banquet began and had not done anything special, everyone's gaze still remained fixed on them. In fact, the people of the Heavenly Qin continent were curious about Shao Sheng's resurrection, but they naturally did not ask. Moreover, Shao Sheng's resurrection was a good thing for the Heavenly Qin continent. Therefore, although the crowd was puzzled, they did not dwell on the matter too much. However, they were very curious about the identities of Randang Kozii and the other 2. What kind of people could be on the same level as Shao Sheng? The banquet continued, and the atmosphere was very lively. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened and the sun set in the west. The banquet was coming to an end. Just when everyone thought the banquet was about to end, a voice suddenly came from the top of the mountain. The voice came from the Saint of 9 Firmaments. Everyone, please be quiet for a moment. Allow me to introduce the 4 great ancestors. Finally, it was time to get to the main topic. Following the Saint of 9 Firmaments' voice, the entire Tianjin peak quieted down. Everyone stared at the top of the mountain. At the same time, the Saint of 9 Firmaments introduced Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors one by one. There is no need to mention Shao Sheng. Everyone had heard of him. As for ancient sage Randang and the other 2, under the introduction of 9 Firmament Saint, everyone knew that they were the old ancestors from the Sky River continent. Ancient sage Randang and the other 2 had contributed greatly to repelling the army of demonic cultivators. Seeing that even the Saint of 9 Firmaments was respectful to Randang Kozii and the other 2, Everyone stood up and bowed respectfully to Randang Cozy Eye and the other two. Greetings, ancestors. Randang Cozy Eye and the other two were not from the Heavenly Chun continent, but the Heavenly Chun continent was indebted to them, and they were very powerful. Therefore, no one objected to being addressed as ancestor. This was how the world worked. If you had strength, you would naturally gain the respect of others. Seeing this, the Saint of the Nine Heavens continued to speak. Today, I have invited everyone here to Nine Firmament Palace not only to celebrate the rebirth of our Heavenly Chun continent, but also to discuss something with everyone here. At this point, the Saint of the Nine Heavens paused and glanced at the crowd before continuing. Everyone should know that our Heavenly Chun continent was in imminent danger when faced with the invasion of the demonic cultivator army. Fortunately, with everyone's efforts, we were able to avert the disaster. However, the price that our Heavenly Chun continent paid was not small. Only a quarter of the warriors who went to the Heavenly River continent with us came back alive. The rest fell in the Heavenly River continent. This is very sad. After this incident, we old fellows have thought about it again and again. We want to gather all the forces of the Heavenly River continent and the Heavenly Chun continent to establish a new sect so that everyone on the two continents can have a better cultivation environment. Everyone will have the possibility of becoming a powerhouse so that the past will not repeat itself. The Saint of the Nine Heavens finally spoke about the establishment of a new sect. The reason why the Saint of the Nine Heavens was asked to speak instead of Xiao Sheng and the other three was because of the situation of the Heavenly Chun continent. After all, compared to Xiao Sheng and the other three, the Saint of the Nine Heavens was definitely more prestigious in the Heavenly Chun continent. This had nothing to do with strength. It was entirely because the people of the Heavenly Chun continent did not know Randang Cozy Eye and the other three. As the Saint of the Nine Heavens finished speaking, everyone looked at each other. Establishing a new sect was something no one had expected. Naturally, some people were happy, while others were sad. However, the Saint of the Nine Heavens did not care about this. After he finished speaking, the Saint of Pill Cloud, Saint of Mutian, Saint of Heavenly Elixir, and the others all spoke up. The saints spoke one after another, clarifying the necessity of establishing a new sect. At the same time, they clearly told everyone that the establishment of a new sect was inevitable. No one had the ability to stop it. Whether it was the Heavenly Chun continent or the Heavenly River continent, a new sect was needed to control both continents. This was beneficial for everyone. The saints supported the reward of establishing a new sect. Hearing this, the powerhouses of the major families and sect below all had their own thoughts. They were constantly thinking about the establishment of a new sect. They repeatedly weighed the pros and cons in their hearts, but on the surface, no one dared to refute. After all, it was the saints who had spoken this time. Anyone with a brain would obviously not refute the saints in front of everyone at this time. Otherwise, they would be asking for trouble. No one refuted. Of course, no one expressed their support. The saints had obviously expected this. Therefore, after the saints finished speaking, the seven major forces, led by the Nine Heavens Palace, quickly made clear that they were willing to fully support the establishment of a new sect. The seven major forces had clearly expressed their support for the reward of establishing a new sect. In this regard, the people of the major families and sects were not stupid. They knew that this was the means of the saints. After all, the seven major forces were under the control of the saints. Since the establishment of a new sect was proposed by the saints, what reason did the seven major forces have not to support it? However, even though the seven major forces had already expressed their stance, everyone still had doubts in their hearts. The most important question was the balance of the pros and cons. It was undeniable that after the establishment of a new sect, there would be benefits, but there would also be disadvantages. Once the new sect was established, all the clans and sects present would have to disband and join the new sect unconditionally. That meant that the former leaders of the major families and sects would have their power taken away unconditionally. Besides, with their status, they didn't know what benefits they would receive after joining the new sect. They didn't know anything yet, but they had to give up their power and disband their own sect. That made them uncomfortable. The ruler of the continent of the nine heavens said, as if he knew what they were thinking, "Actually, you don't need to worry. After joining the new sect, I can guarantee you that you will receive more cultivation resources than you do now. Besides, after the establishment of the new sect, your sects and clans don't have to disband. You can continue to be the leaders of your clans and sections. Talented disciples of your clans and sects will also have the opportunity to join the new sect and receive better cultivation resources." Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 945. Xiao Sheng and the others knew that the rewards of the new sect would affect the interests of the great sects and clans. Therefore, they had already come up with a plan. They wanted to use the situation of the Tiana continent as a reference to establish the new sect. They didn't need to disband their sects and clans. To put it bluntly, after the new sect was established, those sects and clans would be external sections. They would still manage them, just like the relationship between the ancient holy sect and Tian Fengsheng's own back in the Tiana continent. Of course, in order to manage them more efficiently, after the new sect was established, the names of those sects and clans had to be changed. At the same time, there were many rules to manage those external sects, but the ruler of the continent of the nine clouds hadn't said anything yet. They had to take things one step at a time. As expected, when the ruler of the continent of the nine clouds said that, everybody's expression softened. It wasn't difficult to accept. They could continue to be the patriarch of their respective clans, and, at the same time, they could have a powerful backer. They couldn't refuse. Everybody's biggest worries were dispelled. Very quickly, many people expressed their willingness to support the establishment of the new sect. When the saints of the nine clouds saw that, they smiled. As expected, as long as it didn't affect their interests, they wouldn't refuse. But maybe they didn't know that it wasn't easy to become an external sect of the new sect. The new sect had many rules to restrict external sections. He had achieved the desired result. Seeing that no one was against it anymore, the banquet had come to a perfect end. Actually, the saints already had a detailed plan for the rewards of the new sect. They didn't need to say much about the external sects and clans. They just needed to change their names. It wasn't too troublesome. As for the inner sect, according to the vision of Xiao Sheng and the other great ancestors, the inner sect will be composed of the 7 overlords of the Tianqian continent, the ancient saints sect, the heavenly saints sect, and the sun saints sect of the Tiana continent. One thing worth mentioning was that the 3 great sects of the ancient sacred sect included outer sects like the heavenly wind saint. When the time came, all these outer sects would be merged into the new sect. The 7 overlords and the 3 sacred sects combined to form the inner sect of a new sect, and the small sects and clans on the 2 continents formed the outer sect. In this way, the general framework of the new sect was formed. After the announcement of the establishment of a new sect, the banquet ended not long after. Everyone present also left the Sky Sword Peak one after another. After Xiao Chun and the rest returned to their residence, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, and the other 2 ladies did not immediately rest because they had drunk a lot of wine. Instead, they leisurely drank tea and chatted in the garden. Kamagu Gulingji. When he heard that, Xiao Chun nodded with a smile. "Oh, but I didn't expect those people to agree so readily today," Gu Lingyao said with a smile after hearing Xiao Chen's words. She was a smart girl. This little girl was very clever. Her words sounded innocent, but Xiao Chen knew that this little girl had already guessed that there would be a large-scale purge when a new sect was established in the future. When that time came, it was unknown how many of the clan leaders and sect leaders would still be alive. In fact, this was normal. When the saints established the new sect, they would establish an internal sect and an external sect. The existing large sects and clans would form the entire external sect system. However, although they were external sects, they still had to obey the management of the new sect. When the time came, the power of these family and clan leaders would be weakened. Therefore, there would naturally be people who wouldn't agree. Xiao Chen guessed at this time, Xiao Sheng and the other four ancestors would never let the new sect go beyond their control, especially the large number of external sections. Therefore, when the time came, the consequences of those who didn't agree could be imagined. Of course, this was unavoidable. After all, they had spent so much effort. They certainly couldn't let the new sect be divided. This was absolutely not allowed. Moreover, from now on, there could only be one voice in the Tiana continent and the Tianshan continent. This was for sure. So, naturally, there would be bloodshed. Xiao Chen shook his head with a wry smile. These things weren't for him to think about. Anyway, when the time came, there would naturally be someone to deal with it. Xiao Chen didn't need to worry. The establishment of the new sect was thus decided. Although there were still many things that hadn't been clarified, it didn't hinder anything. The road had to be taken one step at a time. Early the next morning, Xiao Chan was cultivating in the courtyard when a Nine Heavens saint came to visit. He said that the ancestors wanted to see him. Hearing that Xiao Sheng and the others wanted to see him, Xiao Chan didn't say much. He immediately rushed to their residence. On the mountain behind Nine Heavens Palace, Xiao Chan met Xiao Sheng and the others. Seeing Xiao Chan arrive, Xiao Sheng pointed to the bamboo chair beside him, indicating for Xiao Chan to sit down, and then said with a smile, "Little guy, we're going to go into seclusion today. After we break through to the quasi-saint realm, we'll help you break through to the Tao Emperor realm." Xiao Sheng and the others were preparing to go into seclusion to break through to the quasi-saint realm. Xiao Chen wasn't surprised by this and nodded in response. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng continued, "Also, we plan to set up the headquarters of a new sect on the Tianshan continent. After all, you know the situation on the Tiana continent. It's not suitable to establish a new sect. They plan to establish the new sect on the Tianshan continent." In this regard, Xiao Chan was a little confused at first, but he soon figured it out. In the previous battle with the demon race, the Tiana continent was basically ruined. All kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures were mined without limit. At this time, almost no treasures could be found on the entire Tiana continent. Because of the consumption of the battle, the cultivation environment on the Tiana continent had become very poor. It was far inferior to the current Tianshan continent. Therefore, it was understandable that Xiao Sheng and the others wanted to establish the new sect on the Tianshan continent. Nodding, he agreed with the decision of the four ancestors. After chatting for a while, Xiao Chun bid farewell and left. Xiao Sheng and the others also went to the land of origin to start breaking through to the quasi-saint realm. There was no need to worry about Xiao Sheng and the others breaking through to the quasi-saint realm. With the accumulation of the four of them in the saint realm, breaking through to the quasi-saint realm was a certainty. Now that they had the power of origin, they believed that the four of them would be able to complete the breakthrough soon. Moreover, Xiaoxing also said that this breakthrough to the quasi-saint realm would take at least 1 month and 2 months. At the same time, Randang Koziyai and the others had also sent people back to the Tiana continent and asked the powerhouses of the Tiana continent to lead the disciples of the Tiana continent to the Tianshan continent to prepare to establish the new sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. This chapter ends. Chapter 946. The headquarters of a new sect would be established in the Tianshan continent. As for the Tiana continent, it would be enough to leave some people to guard it. There is no need to worry about the safety of the Sky River continent, because once the new sect was established, it would naturally build a cross-realm teleportation array between the two continents. Therefore, if anything happened to the Sky River continent, the Saints could use this cross-realm teleportation array to rush to the Sky River continent. It could be said that Xiao Sheng and the other three had already considered all kinds of matters regarding the establishment of the new sect. After returning to his residence, Xiao Chan saw Qing Yao, who had been waiting for him, as soon as he entered the door. Qing Yao bowed to Xiao Chun and said sweetly, "Young master, Master and Madam are looking for you." The master and madam that Qing Yao mentioned were naturally Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue. Hearing this, Shao Chen smiled and said, "Okay, I'll go over now." Shao Chen didn't know why his parents were looking for him, but he still went straight to the backyard and came to the courtyard where Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue lived. As soon as he entered, Shao Chen saw Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue enjoying the cool air in the courtyard. At the same time, there was a middle-aged man sitting beside Shao Qing. Shao Chen also knew this person. If he counted, he should be Shao Chen's uncle and Shao Qing's cousin. His name was Shao Muqin, the current master of the Shao family. Seeing Shao Chen walking over, Shao Qing laughed and scolded, "You little brat, where did you run off to so early in the morning? Your uncle is here, but you didn't come to greet him. Father, mother, and uncle, good day." Hearing Shao Qing's laughter, Shao Chen also smiled bitterly and greeted the three of them. Seeing this, Shao Muqin was at a loss. He personally got up and helped Shao Chen up and said with a smile, "I haven't seen you for so many years. Chen'er has grown up, haha." Shao Chen didn't have much influence on Shao Muqin. However, in his memory, Shao Muqin was the person who had the best relationship with his father, Shao Qing. Although the two of them were only cousins, they had played together since they were young. In terms of relationship, they were even closer than biological brothers. It was precisely because of this that Shao Chen agreed to let Shao Muqin become the head of the Shao family. After all, although Shao Chen did not have any thoughts about the Shao clan, it was still his own clan. After all, the person in charge naturally had to be someone close to his family or someone who he could command. That was the only way to make it work. Moreover, Shao Muqin had indeed managed the Shao family well over the years. Therefore, Shao Chen was quite satisfied with Shao Muqin as the head of the family. After praising Shao Chen with a smile, Shao Muqin enthusiastically pulled Shao Chen to the pavilion and sat down. At the same time, Bai Ruyue also spoke up. "Chen'er, your father and I plan to pay a visit to the Shao family. It's been so many years, it's time to go back and take a look." She asked Shao Chen to come here mainly for this matter. Hearing this, Shao Chen nodded and said, "Yes, it's time to go back and take a look. It just so happens that I have nothing to do during this time, so I'll go back with my parents." He knew that his parents were homesick, and it just so happened that Shao Sheng and the other three were in seclusion. Shao Chen also had nothing to do, so he agreed to go back to the Shao family with his parents. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Bai Ruyue was naturally very happy. They agreed to set off tomorrow. After that, Shao Chen chatted with his parents and Shao Muqin for a while before leaving. After returning to his courtyard, Shao Chen told Qin Shiru and the other two girls about going to the Shao family. The three girls immediately said that they wanted to go together. After all, they had nothing to do in Nine Firmament's palace. Early the next morning, they prepared to set off. However, there were a lot of people going with them. Shao Chen did not expect that just Shao Chen's family alone had more than 10 people. Shao Chen, Shao Qing, Bai Ruyue, Qin Shiru, and the other two girls, Qing Yao, Qing Luo, and the other two maids. In addition, Long Qing, Chun Ling, and Qin Yu had heard the news from somewhere and had rushed over early, saying that they wanted to go to Lingshan County with Shao Chen. There were a lot of people going with them. The group left Nine Firmament's palace in a grandiose manner. As they did not have anything to do, they were not in a hurry. Along the way, they stopped and visited many places in the heavenly Chun mainland. Along the way, they fulfilled Shao Chen's promise. He brought Qin Yu and the other three girls to visit the heavenly Chun mainland. This made Qin Yu and the others very happy. Just like that, they traveled and visited the Lingshan County. It took them an entire month to reach the Lingshan County. It was a remote place located in the easternmost part of the heavenly Chun mainland. However, the present Lingshan County was very different from before. Although it was located in a remote area, the Lingshan County was extremely famous in the heavenly Chun mainland. The reason for that was because the Shao family of Lingshan County was once a sacred clan. Additionally, in this generation, Shao Chen, a monstrous genius, had appeared. After not returning for several decades, the Lingshan County had changed greatly. It had become much more prosperous. The small cities that were once there had now become large and bustling cities. The area had expanded greatly, and the city was bustling with activity. That was especially true for the Lingshan County, where the Shao family resided. It was extremely prosperous, in no way inferior to the few great cities in the divine central region. Compared to before, the area of the Lingshan County city had expanded by more than 10 times. Around the original old city, a larger new city had been built. At the same time, as this was the Shao family's headquarters, warriors from all over the world had gathered here. These people came from all over the world. Some came here to travel and experience the power of the sacred clan. Some wanted to become a consecrator of the Shao family. There were even some who directly moved their families to the Lingshan County city, intending to settle down here. Regardless of their motives, the current Lingshan County city could be said to be the most popular city in the entire heavenly Chun mainland. Without disturbing the others, Shao Chun and the others entered the city through the city gates like ordinary people and strolled along the streets of the Lingshan County city. It had been a long time since he returned home. Shao Chun felt a myriad of emotions as he looked at the unfamiliar yet familiar Lingshan County city in front of him. One must remember that when he was young, when he was only in his teens, he walked out of the small Lingshan County city. At that time, Shao Chun was still a fledgling. It was from here that Shao Chun embarked on the path of martial arts. It could be said that Lingshan County city was the place where Shao Chun was born. It was also the starting point for him to embark on the path of martial arts. It was also his first time in the Lingshan County city. Gu Lingyao was very excited. She surrounded Shao Chun and chattered nonstop. Gu Lingyao's lively and cute appearance made Bai Ruyue very fond of her. Unconsciously, she began to tell everyone about Shao Chun's childhood. Being able to listen to this evildoer's childhood story naturally whetted everyone's appetite. Soon, not only Gu Lingyao, but even Qin Shu, Fairy of 100 Flowers, Chun Ling, and Long Qin gathered around Bai Ruyue and listened attentively to her story. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 9:47. Everyone unknowingly gathered around Bai Ruyue and listened to her talk about Shao Chun's childhood. In fact, there was nothing much to say about Shao Chun's childhood. Compared to children of the same age, Shao Chun was very mature. He was already very sensible when he was 5 or 6 years old. Moreover, Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue did not have to worry about his cultivation. Shao Chun was able to arrange his time in an orderly manner. Moreover, Shao Chun showed great talent when he first came into contact with martial art cultivation. At that time, as a large family in Lingshan County, Shao Qing specially hired many teachers for Shao Chun. However, these teachers did not stay in the Shao family for long. The reason was very simple. Shao Chun's progress was too fast. In the end, these teachers basically had nothing to teach him. Thinking about it, when Shao Chun was young, Lingshan County was definitely the poorest place in the heavenly Qin continent. The teachers who could be hired here definitely had very low cultivation and knowledge. Therefore, they did not have any real ability to teach Shao Chun. Shao Chun did not have too many embarrassing incidents when he was young. Perhaps there was nothing to talk about. In the end, Bai Ruyue simply told everyone about Shao Chun's bedwetting when he was young. I still remember when this kid wet his bed for the first time. Bai Ruyue said excitedly. But at this time, Shao Chun couldn't help but interrupt. Mother, why are you talking about this? When did it happen? Yo. Our great holy son, Shao, actually wet his bed. I thought you were a natural prodigy. Ha! Seeing Shao Chun's face turn red, Chun Yu immediately teased him with a mischievous smile. It was very normal for a child to wet his bed. Facing Chun Yu's teasing, Shao Chun said snappily, "You say it as if you have never wet your bed before." Of course I have, but we're just ordinary people. How can we compare to a monster like you? Speaking of which, after hearing about your childhood, I feel that you are much more realistic. Sigh. It seems that there is no way to be perfect. Huh. Facing Xiao Qin's rebuttal, Qinyu laughed indifferently. Perhaps it was because Xiao Qin was usually too perfect. Now that they heard about Xiao Qin's childhood, everyone felt that it was more realistic. After all, no matter how heaven-defying Xiao Qin was, no matter how high his talent was, he was still an ordinary human like everyone else. He did not have 3 heads and 6 arms. However, even though they were teasing Xiao Qin, there were still some things that made them depressed, especially when they found out that Xiao Qin actually came from a small city in the corner of the city. Everyone could not help but admire Xiao Qin's talent once again. Imagine if Xiao Qin's birth was better, or if Xiao Qin was born in the Tiana continent, then Xiao Qin's current achievements would be much higher than now. It could be said that during Xiao Qin's childhood, the Xiao family could not give Xiao Qin much help. They only gave Xiao Qin some enlightenment. After that, Xiao Qin relied on himself. When he was in his teens, he left home alone and traveled all the way from Lingshan County until he entered the Eastern Sword Pavilion. Xiao Qin walked step by step alone. As they chatted, they unknowingly arrived at the entrance of the Xiao Mansion. It wasn't as dazzling as the Qin Mansion. Although the Xiao Mansion had been renovated over the years and its area had expanded a lot, it was still very simple and there wasn't anything luxurious. Xiao Qin was very satisfied with the Xiao family's low profile. The group walked into the Xiao residence. After receiving the news that Xiao Qin and the others had returned, the Xiao family quickly rushed to the front yard. After so many years of development, the Xiao family's population had increased a lot. Many of the collateral relatives who had been wandering outside had also moved back to the Xiao residence. Moreover, many of the people of Xiao Qin's generation already had their own children after so many years. The population had increased a lot compared to before. Under the crowd's escort, Xiao Qin and his family arrived at the main hall. After everyone took their seats, it was inevitable that they would be enthusiastic. They chatted with each other and talked about the past. For a time, Xiao Qin and Bai Riyue were both moved and their eyes turned red. When they heard that the small courtyard where the family used to live was still preserved, Bai Rui could not help but go to the small courtyard where they used to live, accompanied by a few madams, to visit. In the Xiao residence, Xiao Qin and Bai Riyue could not help but recall the regretful past. Over the years, because they had such an outstanding son like Xiao Qin, the old couple's days could be said to be extremely rich and colorful. After experiencing so many things, people would naturally be nostalgic. Regarding this, Xiao Qin was also deeply touched. It was rare for them to return to the Xiao residence. Everyone stayed in the Xiao residence and was not in a hurry to return to Nine Firmaments Palace. Living in the courtyard that was once incomparably familiar to them, it was as if time had flowed back to when they were young. Someone once said that the home was everyone's harbor. Now, Xiao Qin finally understood the true meaning of this sentence. In the Xiao residence, facing the smiles of the clansmen every day, accompanying his parents in his free time, and teasing his nephews and nieces, his days were extremely comfortable. It was as if he had lived in the Xiao residence for half a month. On this day, Xiao Qin sat in the courtyard and drank tea as usual. Beside him were the 3 women of Qin Shu and a few other clansmen of the Xiao residence. They could be considered as Xiao Qin's cousins. Not far away, there were more than a dozen of Xiao Qin's nephews and nieces making a scene. Xiao Qin had a sincere smile on his face as he looked at his nephews and nieces who were only 4 or 5 years old. This time, Xiao Qin naturally did not come back empty-handed. He also gave many good things to the clansmen of the Xiao residence, especially his nephews and nieces. Xiao Qin was not stingy. He even personally cleansed the marrow of these little fellows. With this, when they started to step onto the path of martial arts in the future, it would be easier for them. Facing these innocent children, Qin Shu and the other 2 women at the side seemed to have completely changed. Their eyes were filled with envy. The meaning was obvious. They also wanted to give birth to a son and 2 daughters for Xiao Qin and have a taste of what it was like to be a parent. Just as everyone was enjoying themselves, without any warning, for heavenly punishments suddenly descended from the sky in the central divine realm, which was extremely far away from Lingshan Commandery. The power of these 4 heavenly punishments was extremely terrifying. Even a saint would pale in the face of these 4 heavenly punishments. In the sky, 4 huge spatial black holes appeared. Through the holes, one could see thick bolts of heavenly lightning crisscrossing within these 4 spatial black holes. A terrifying pressure immediately swept across the land, causing countless people to be shocked. They could not help but look up at the sky, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 948. When the 4 heavenly punishments appeared at the same time, the pressure from the 4 heavenly punishments made one's hair stand on end. Almost everyone in the heavenly Chun continent could feel the terrifying pressure from the 4 heavenly punishments. Even though Shao Chun was in Lingshan Commandery City, he could still feel the heavenly punishments from the distant central divine territory. Such heavenly punishments far exceeded the heavenly punishments of the saint stage. There was only one explanation. The 4 heavenly punishments were formed when Shao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs broke through to the quasi-saint stage. It had been almost 2 months since Shao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs went into seclusion. According to Shao Sheng, it was indeed time for them to break through to the quasi-saint stage. Shao Chun gazed in the direction of the central divine territory. Although he couldn't see the sky of the central divine territory from where he was, he could clearly feel the terrifying heavenly punishments. In contrast to Shao Chen's calm demeanor, the other members of the Shao family, as well as the children who were only 5 or 6 years old, were all horrified. The children hid in the arms of the adults and looked at the sky with their innocent eyes from time to time. However, it was only a glance before they buried their heads back into their parents' arms. Cousin this, one of the Shao family members asked Shao Chun in horror. Shao Chun smiled and said, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Shao Chun knew that this was caused by Shao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs breaking through to the quasi-saint stage, so he wasn't worried. Seeing this, the Shao family members heaved a sigh of relief. However, the grave expression on their faces showed that they were still very nervous. No one in the Tianqian continent had ever seen a quasi-saint level heavenly punishment. Even the saints had never seen a quasi-saint level heavenly punishment. Therefore, after the 4 heavenly punishment appeared, several figures appeared around the 4 heavenly punishment. They were the 9 firmament saint and the others. No one dared to get close to the heavenly punishments and could only watch from afar. However, even though they were far enough away, the 9 heaven saint and the others were still scared witless. Good heavens, if this were to happen to me, wouldn't I be reduced to ashes? Pill Cloud Saint laughed foolishly after taking a sip of wine. Hearing this, the heavenly Pill Saint snorted in annoyance. "You're so useless." As his wife, the heavenly Pill Saint did not give the Pill Cloud Saint any face at all. However, the Pill Cloud Saint did not care about this at all. His gaze was fixed on the 4 heavenly punishments in the sky, and he would occasionally take a sip of wine. Saint appeared, Saint stage, Saint stage. 4 heavenly punishments of the quasi-saint stage, heavenly punishments. 4 heavenly punishments of the heavens, saint stage punishments of the quasi-saint stage, heavenly punishments. The 4 figures did not exude any terrifying aura. They were just like ordinary people. However, they gave off a feeling that they were the rulers of the world. It was as if they just stood there and did nothing. The 4 of them were the masters of the world. These 4 people were none other than Shao Sheng and the other 3. Their cultivations had already broken through from the sage accomplished realm to the beginning of the quasi-sage realm. Shao Sheng and the other 3 appeared at this time. Their gazes were fixed on the 4 heavenly punishments in the sky. Shao Sheng said faintly with a wry smile on his face, "The sky law of the quasi-saint realm really can't be underestimated. Compared to the heavenly punishment of the sage realm, the heavenly punishment of the quasi-sage realm was many times stronger. Anyone below the quasi-sage realm would definitely die upon contact with such a heavenly punishment. However, even though this was the case, Xiao Sheng and the other three had all broken through to the quasi-sage realm. Perhaps only they knew that the difference in their strength was like the difference between heaven and earth. The four of them had been trapped in the sage accomplished realm for thousands of years. They had long possessed the qualifications to break through to the quasi-sage realm. Now, they finally got what they wanted. Their strength was absolutely incomparable to before. They had finally entered the ranks of the quasi-sage realm. The improvement of their cultivation gave Xiao Sheng and the other three more confidence when facing the heavenly punishment of the quasi-sage realm. As Xiao Sheng's voice fell, four thick heavenly thunderbolts struck down from the four black holes in the sky as if they had been provoked. They went straight for Xiao Sheng and the other three. The heavenly punishment arrived as scheduled. In the face of the heavenly thunderbolts, a terrifying aura erupted from Xiao Sheng and the other three. As soon as this aura appeared, the expressions of Saint Jiuxiao and the others in the distance changed. Saint Mutian couldn't help but murmur softly, "Is this the coercion of the quasi-sage realm?" As soon as the coercion of the quasi-sage realm was released, the heavens and the earth seemed to change color. All the saints' expressions changed drastically, and they couldn't help but reveal a look of yearning in their eyes. Everyone felt that the saint realm was already an unattainable existence. However, they didn't know that the three realms of the saint realm, the sage realm, the quasi-sage realm, and the great sage realm, could be said to be a whole new level with each step. Without personal experience, one would never know how big the gap between the three realms of the saint realm was. For example, in the three realms of the saint realm, every breakthrough of a major realm was like a sublimation of life level. It could be said that the difference between the two realms was simply not on the same level. Saints were very strong, but in front of a quasi-sage, they couldn't make any waves at all. They could be suppressed with a flip of their hand. This was the difference between a quasi-sage and a saint. This was also why Xiao Sheng and the other old ancestors secretly prayed when they faced the northern demon continent. They hoped that there was no quasi-sage in the northern demon continent. Otherwise, no matter how hard the Tiana continent struggled, it would be impossible for them to win, let alone the 8 years of bloody war that followed. It was simply a fool's dream. The coercion of Xiao Sheng and the other three swept across the earth, forming an equal force with the heavenly punishment. At the same time, in the face of the four heavenly thunderbolts, Xiao Sheng and the other three made their moves one after another, forcibly colliding with the heavenly thunderbolts. In the face of the heavenly punishment, there was no need to think about escaping, because there was no way to escape. The only way was to resist it head-on. If one could withstand the heavenly punishment, it would mean success. Of course, if one couldn't withstand the heavenly punishment, they would only end up dead. The first heavenly punishment did not cause any serious injuries to Xiao Sheng and the other three, but this was just the beginning. Soon, the second heavenly punishment fell. This second heavenly punishment was twice as powerful as the first. Moreover, the color of the heavenly punishment had turned dark blue. It looked like a thunder dragon, roaring as it rushed out of the black hole and rushed straight toward Xiao Sheng and the other three. The power of laws surrounded them, and terrifying spiritual fluctuations swept across the sky. Once again, Xiao Sheng and the other three collided fiercely with the heavenly punishment. The terrifying aftershock spread in all directions, and the powerful shock wave destroyed everything within a radius of 100 miles. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 9:49. It was as if the end of the world had come. As the second heavenly punishment fell, everything in the surroundings turned into ashes. Not even a blade of grass grew on the ground, as if it had been cut by a knife, leaving only a vast expanse of land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Two heavenly punishments in a row had already stunned Saint Jiuxiao and the others. They were both heavenly punishments, but the heavenly punishments of the quasi-saint realm and the heavenly punishments of the saint realm were like fathers and sons. There was no comparison at all. After the baptism of the second heavenly punishment, Xiao Sheng and the others were also seriously injured. It could be seen that even though the four of them were quasi-saints, it was still difficult for them to resist the heavenly punishment. They gritted their teeth and persevered. Then, when the second heavenly punishment fell, the third one was already brewing. Saint Danyun laughed heartily when he felt that the heavenly might in the four spatial black holes had not decreased, but increased instead. Again, does the quasi-saint realm have three heavenly punishments in a row? There was only one heavenly punishment in the saint realm, but there were three in the quasi-saint realm, and the power was even more terrifying. As the third heavenly punishment fell, the sky seemed to have lost its color in an instant. The whole sky was illuminated by the lightning, and the sun could not be seen. Black thunder. The third heavenly punishment was actually a black heavenly thunder, whistling out from the spatial black holes. Faced with the third heavenly punishment, Xiao Sheng smiled bitterly and helplessly. Does this mean that you don't want me to live? Don't talk nonsense. Attack with all your might. I don't want to collect your corpse again. Hearing Xiao Sheng's complaint, Saint Ice Lotus, who was not far away, said grumpily. Then, she stared at the black thunder coming from the sky. Her whole body tensed up, and she was ready to attack with all her might at any time. Faced with the third heavenly punishment of black thunder, Xiao Sheng and the others did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Soon, the black thunder arrived as expected, and fiercely bombarded Xiao Sheng and the others. With just one touch, the defense around Xiao Sheng and the others was torn apart layer by layer like a piece of white paper. Regardless of whether it was spiritual energy or the power of laws, they were all as fragile as paper as they were torn apart layer by layer. Then, the black lightning ruthlessly struck the four people's bodies. Blood splattered everywhere, and their bodies felt like they were about to be torn apart. There was no other way. Xiao Sheng and the other three could only grit their teeth and persevere, trying their best to retain the last trace of consciousness. Around 10 minutes later, the black lightning slowly dissipated. The heavenly might from the four black holes in the sky also slowly dissipated. Clearly, the heavenly punishment had ended. Xiao Sheng and the other three naturally felt extremely fortunate. The third bolt of heavenly punishment of black lightning had already severely injured them. If there was another bolt of heavenly punishment of black lightning, there was no doubt that the four of them would be blasted to death on the spot. The injuries on their bodies were extremely serious. They were already secondary saints, but right now, Xiao Sheng and the other three looked extremely miserable. Fortunately, they had managed to survive the divine punishment without any mishap. As for the injuries on their bodies, they would recover after a few days of rest. The attack of the divine punishment was different from other attacks. It seemed that Xiao Chun and the others were on their last breaths, but in fact, they did not suffer any internal injuries. The divine punishment was God's punishment for warriors, but at the same time, it was also a test. After passing it, there would be unexpected benefits. At the same time, the baptism of the divine punishment could also temper the physical body and stabilize the foundation. There were many benefits. At the same time, the injuries caused by the divine punishment would strangely not harm the warriors' meridians. As long as they did not die, they would recover very quickly. The black holes in the sky slowly closed, and Xiao Sheng and the other three were on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, the Saint of Nine Heavens hurried over from afar and supported Xiao Sheng and the others. "Ancestor, are you all right?" The Saint of Nine Heavens asked with concern as he supported Xiao Sheng. Faced with the Saint of Nine Heavens' question, Xiao Sheng forced a smile and said, "I'm all right. Let's go back first." The divine punishment had passed, and Xiao Sheng and the other three had survived safely. As such, the four of them could be considered to have truly become secondary saints. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, The victor of 9 heavens nodded. Then, under the care of a group of saints, the group quickly returned to 9 heavens palace. Because of the divine punishment, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 spent the next few days in seclusion on the mountain behind 9 heavens palace. After 10 days, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 finally came out of seclusion. There were no more injuries on their bodies, and their complexions were healthy. Because they had broken through to secondary saint, the 4 of them looked much younger. Their skin was as white as a baby's, making them look like young men and women in their 20s. This was especially true for Prime Saint Ice Lotus and Prime Saint Mingjia. They were actually old monsters who had lived for thousands of years. However, judging from their appearances, they were about the same age as Qin Shiru and the other 2 girls. Xiao Sheng was the same. If no one said anything, who would have thought that Xiao Sheng was actually Xiao Qin's ancestor? Judging from their appearances, the 2 of them were like brothers. Compared to Xiao Sheng and the other 2, Randang Cozy Eye had a different personality. His skin was white, but his white hair hadn't changed much. He gave people a different feeling, as if he was a Tao expert. After surviving the divine punishment, the 4 of them had completely stabilized their newly broken secondary saint realm with the help of the divine punishment. Compared to 10 days ago, their auras were more profound and restrained. If they didn't deliberately release it, even saints would find it difficult to sense the auras of Xiao Sheng and the other 3. At first glance, the 4 of them were no different from ordinary people. With a smile on his face, Xiao Sheng looked at Prime Saint Ice Lotus and the other 3. Let's go and find Xiao Chen first. After the 4 of them had broken through, the next step was to help Xiao Chen cleanse his body and break through his cultivation. Hearing this, Prime Saint Ice Lotus and the other 2 nodded slightly. Since they had decided to support Xiao Chen to become the first saint of the new sect, Xiao Chen naturally couldn't just be a Tao sovereign. No matter what, he had to be a Tao emperor. Otherwise, wouldn't he be embarrassing the new sect? Knowing that Xiao Chen was now in the Xiao clan of Lingshan City, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 didn't inform anyone and directly rushed to Lingshan City. With the speed of the 4 secondary saints, it was almost as if they were riding a teleportation formation. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in the small courtyard where Xiao Chen lived without disturbing the Xiao clan. While he was cultivating, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 suddenly arrived. Xiao Chen also put away his sword and said with a smile, "Ancestor, congratulations on breaking through to the secondary saint stage." It was obvious that Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were already secondary saints. Hearing this, Xiao Sheng scolded with a smile. "All right, you're being hypocritical. Let's not talk nonsense. Find a cultivation room. The 4 of us will cleanse your body and help you break through." Without wasting any time, they went straight to the point. Hearing this, Xiao Chen led the 4 to the cultivation room. In the cultivation room, Xiao Chen sat cross-legged on a cushion while Xiao Sheng and the other 3 stood around Xiao Chen. They looked at each other and nodded slightly. Then, the 4 of them acted at the same time. For a time, 4 streams of pure spiritual energy directly entered Xiao Chen's body and began to flow along Xiao Chen's meridians, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 950. Xiao Chen was probably the only one who could enjoy the treatment of 4 quasi-sages working together. He felt 4 different spiritual powers flowing through his body, but he did not feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he felt very comfortable. These 4 spiritual powers were not absorbed by Xiao Chen. Of course, even if Xiao Chen wanted to, he could not do it. These are the spiritual powers of quasi-sages. Under the control of Xiao Sheng and the other 3, these 4 spiritual powers slowly cleanse the impurities in Xiao Chen's meridians. With the circulation of these 4 spiritual powers, the impurities in Xiao Chen's meridians were constantly forced out of his body. Soon, Xiao Chen's skin was covered by a layer of black liquid that emitted a foul smell. Don't underestimate this small marrow cleansing. It should be known that using one's own spiritual power to cleanse someone's marrow was not a simple matter. Not only did it require extremely high control of spiritual power, but it also required a sufficiently domineering spiritual power. Neither of these two aspects could be omitted. If the spiritual power was not domineering enough, it would not be able to force out the impurities in the body. If the spiritual power was not controlled well enough, it was very likely that it would hurt Xiao Chun instead. This whole process did not allow the slightest bit of carelessness. It should be known that Xiao Chun now had the spiritual powers of 4 quasi-sages in his body. If there was a slight mistake, the spiritual powers of the quasi-sage realm could instantly turn Xiao Chun's meridians and essence into a completely useless person. Therefore, the marrow cleansing for Xiao Chun was an extremely strenuous task for Xiao Sheng and the other 3. If it were not for the fact that they wanted Xiao Chun to have the strength of the first Holy Sun, the 4 of them obviously would not have done this. However, in just a short while, the foreheads of Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were covered with fine beads of sweat. It was obvious that the 4 of them had consumed a lot of spiritual power. This lasted for a whole hour. Then, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 withdrew their spiritual powers at the same time. At the same time, Xiao Chun also slowly opened his eyes. He could clearly feel that his body seemed to have relaxed a lot. He looked at Xiao Sheng and the other 3 and smiled happily. "Ancestor, you're really amazing. The effect is much better than the marrow cleansing Saint Elixir. However, why do I feel that the impurities in my body have not been completely removed? You brat, the 4 of us are attacking at the same time. How can a marrow cleansing Saint Elixir compare to us? Moreover, do you think we can get rid of the impurities in your body in one go? Stop talking nonsense and rest for a day. We'll continue tomorrow." Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, Xiao Sheng snapped. He then sat down cross-legged and began to regulate his breathing. In just 2 hours, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were exhausted, mainly because of the mental exhaustion. After all, they could not afford to make any mistakes. It was impossible to completely remove the impurities in Xiao Chun's body in one go. Over the years in the Sky River continent, in order to quickly break through his cultivation, Xiao Chun had taken a lot of pills and used the help of many cultivation mystic realms. As the saying goes, too much is as bad as too little. After so many pills and cultivation mystic realms accumulated over time, the impurities naturally settled in Xiao Chun's body. Therefore, to completely cleanse Xiao Chun's body and marrow, it was not something that could be done once or twice. This was mainly due to the fact that Xiao Chun had been suppressing his cultivation for the past 8 years. He was also constantly consolidating his foundation and removing the impurities in his body. Otherwise, it would have taken even longer. In the next few days, Xiao Chun enjoyed the cleansing of his body and marrow by Xiao Sheng and the other 3. In this regard, Xiao Chun was very happy, but Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were exhausted. At this time, the 4 quasi-sages were sweating profusely every day. Not only did they have to help Xiao Chun cleanse his body and marrow, but they also had to give Qin Shu and the other 2 women some benefits. Therefore, while helping Xiao Chun cleanse his body and marrow, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 also helped Qin Shu and the other 2 women consolidate their foundation. Of course, the treatment of Qin Shu and the other 2 women naturally could not be compared to Xiao Chun. This was certain, but the 3 women had no complaint about this. Time passed day by day, and it took a full half a month for Xiao Sheng and the other 3 to complete the cleansing of Xiao Chun's body and marrow. When the last cleansing was completed, the last trace of impurities in Xiao Chun's body was expelled. Xiao Chun felt as if he had been reborn. This feeling was like a baby who had just been born. His whole body was incomparably pure and clean. It was a very good feeling, but Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were almost driven crazy. 10 days was a torment for them. The 4 of them simply gritted their teeth and persevered for 2 hours every day. Finally, they completed the cleansing of their body and marrow. Next, they helped Xiao Chun to improve his cultivation. Although Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were quasi-sages, there was a certain degree of danger in forcibly improving their cultivation. Moreover, this method could only be used once at most. Otherwise, it would cause irreversible damage to Xiao Chen's foundation. They rested for 3 days in a row. On this day, Xiao Sheng's group and Xiao Chun came to the cultivation room at the same time. Before they began, Xiao Sheng restrained his usual casualness and spoke in an extremely serious manner. Kid, the 4 of us helping you forcefully improve your cultivation doesn't mean that it'll be a 100% success rate. So during the entire process, you must remember that you absolutely can't force it. Once you feel that you're unable to break through, you must not advance rashly. You'd rather give up than forcefully break through the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm. Otherwise, your foundation in the martial Tao will be crippled. At that time, even the 4 of us won't be able to remedy it. This was not a joke, so Xiao Sheng spoke in an extremely serious manner. Forcefully improving one's cultivation was indeed too risky. Everything could only be done naturally. If he could break through, then so be it. If he couldn't, then so be it. Xiao Chen nodded heavily when he heard Xiao Sheng's advice. After that, Xiao Sheng's group of 4 didn't start right away. They allowed Xiao Chen to adjust his state first, and they only started after an entire 2 hours had passed. Their spirit energy entered Xiao Chen's body and helped Xiao Chen start to charge into the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm. However, Xiao Sheng and the others were very careful throughout the entire process, and they didn't dare use too much strength. On the other hand, with the help of Xiao Sheng's group of 4, Xiao Chen consciously observed the situation in his body carefully. Once he noticed that he couldn't continue, he would immediately stop charging into the Tao Emperor realm. Time flowed by slowly. For hours later, no matter if it was Xiao Chen, Xiao Sheng, or the others, dense beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads, and the sweat flowed down their faces and ceaselessly dripped to the ground. At the same time, Xiao Chen finally sensed the critical factor to break through. With the help of Xiao Sheng's group of 4, Xiao Chen controlled the spirit energy within his body to charge swiftly towards the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm. Bang! A muffled bang resounded from within his body, and then the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm shattered. After that, Xiao Chen's cultivation started to rise steadily. After they sensed that Xiao Chen had successfully broken through, Xiao Sheng's group of 4 withdrew their spirit energy at the first possible moment, and then they slowly opened their eyes while a wisp of faint smiles appeared on the corners of their mouths. We've finally succeeded. Fortunately, Xiao Chen's accumulation during these 8 years of time was sufficiently deep. Otherwise, it would probably really be difficult for him to break through into the Tao Emperor realm. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. End of this chapter. Chapter 9:51. Actually, the actions of Xiao Sheng's group of 4 had merely added fuel to the fire. If Xiao Chun himself didn't possess the ability to break through to the Tao Emperor realm, then he would definitely be unable to break through successfully as well. Of course, with the cultivations of Xiao Sheng's group of 4, it wasn't that they couldn't forcefully improve Xiao Chen's cultivation to the Tao Emperor realm. However, doing so wouldn't bring any benefits, and it would even harm Xiao Chen. Because if they forcefully improved Xiao Chen's cultivation to the Tao Emperor realm, then it would be no different than pulling up a seedling to help it grow. Just as Xiao Sheng had said earlier, it would cause irreversible damage to Xiao Chen's foundation in the martial Tao. At that time, it would be extremely difficult for Xiao Chen to improve further. It was naturally impossible for a holy son like Xiao Chen to destroy his future for the sake of a momentary improvement. So, Xiao Sheng's group of 4 hadn't forcefully improved Xiao Chen's cultivation this time, and they were just going with the flow. If Xiao Chen possessed the ability to break through, then Xiao Sheng's group of 4 would lend him a hand. On the other hand, if Xiao Chen was unable to break through, then they could only give up. Fortunately, Xiao Chen didn't disappoint them in the end, and he successfully broke through to the Tao Emperor realm. Xiao Sheng's group of 4 were gratified. As for Xiao Chen himself, he was slightly excited. The Tao Emperor realm. If it was 100 years ago on the heavenly Chun continent, then he would be an overlord, the king of the entire continent. When Shao Chun had just made a name for himself, the overlord of the Tao Emperor realm was an unreachable existence. However, all along the way, Shao Chun had similarly attained this level. Everything seemed like a dream. Shao Chun had unknowingly attained this level as well. And Shao Chun was merely 100 years old this year. Perhaps 100 years of age could be considered as an extremely old age amongst ordinary people. However, 100 years of age was nothing amongst cultivators. Especially at the Tao Emperor realm, 100 years of age was practically an immature child. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Shao Chun slowly opened his eyes. When he looked at Shao Sheng, the corners of his mouth unconsciously widened into a smile. The Tao Emperor realm. You've finally broken through to the Tao Emperor realm. When he saw Shao Chun grinning like a lotus flower, Shao Sheng scolded angrily with a smile. Brat, don't be so happy. You can stay in the Shao clan and cultivate in seclusion for the time being. Take it. As he spoke, Shao Sheng tossed a jade bottle to Shao Chun. When Shao Chun opened the jade bottle, he discovered that there were 20 marrow-cleansing pills inside. It did not leave any pills for Shao Chun to increase his cultivation. Shao Sheng and the other 3 left Shao Chun only marrow-cleansing pills for him to stabilize his cultivation that had just broken through. Shao Chun was not dissatisfied with Shao Sheng and the other 3's decision. Subsequently, Shao Sheng and the other 3 gave Qin Shiru and the other too many pills as well. Compared to Shao Chun, the 3 women obviously received more pills. Not only were there marrow-cleansing pills, but there were also many pills that could increase cultivation. In fact, Qin Shiru and the other 2 women had also received many benefits during the time that Shao Sheng and the other 3 were here. Now that they had these pills, it was completely enough for the 3 women to break through to the Tao Master realm in one fell swoop. After accepting the pills from Shao Sheng and the other 3, Shao Sheng looked at Shao Chun and said, "Well, we will start to set up the new sect in the next few days. You can stay in the Shao clan and cultivate well. When the matter of the new sect is settled, I will come back to inform you." The preparations for the establishment of the new sect were almost done. Calculating the time, the people from the Tiana continent should have arrived. Thus, Shao Sheng and the other 3 began to set up the new sect. Of course, the first step was naturally to choose a site and build the headquarters of the new sect. In this regard, Shao Chun naturally would not take the initiative to ask. What a joke. It was rare for him to be free, so why should he work hard? Anyway, once the new sect was established, Shao Chun could go directly. Wasn't it easy? Shao Sheng and the other 3 completed their task. On the same day, the 4 of them left Lingshan Commandery City. Shao Chun, Qin Shiru, and the other 2 women stayed in the Shao clan. On the second day after Shao Sheng and the other 3 left, Qin Shiru and the other 2 women went into seclusion at the same time. Shao Chun, who had nothing to do, also began to concentrate on cultivation. Every day, in addition to the usual cultivation, he also refined the marrow-cleansing divine pills. His days were quite fulfilling. He did not care about the establishment of the new sect at all. After all, these things did not require Shao Chun's attention. At the same time, Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors also decided on the location of the new sect. Shao Chun did not know what Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors were thinking. Otherwise, he would have been shocked. This was because Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors did not intend to establish the new sect directly on the Tianqian continent. Instead, they planned to open up a separate pocket dimension on the Tianqian continent. At first glance, it did not seem difficult to open up a separate pocket dimension. At least, it was so for a quasi-sage. However, the pocket dimension that Shao Sheng and the other 3 ancestors planned to open up this time was much larger. According to the 4 ancestors' plan, the headquarters of the new sect would be directly established in this separate pocket dimension. Moreover, the cultivation secret realms of the Ancient Saints sect, Heavenly Saints sect, Sun Saints sect, and the nine heavens divine technique would all be moved to this pocket dimension. From now on, the disciples of a new sect would carry out their daily life and cultivation in the pocket dimension. They would not need to have too much contact with the outside world. Moving the entire new sect into this pocket dimension meant that the area of this pocket dimension would naturally not be small. This would be a test for Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors. The entrance to the pocket dimension was set on the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. This Heavenly Stellar Mountain was the sacred mountain of the Tianqian continent. However, from now on, the peak of this Heavenly Stellar Mountain will be the passage for the new sect to contact the outside world. It could also be regarded as a display of the identity and status of the new sect. Without further ado, Xiao Sheng and the other four ancestors began to build the new pocket dimension. The four quasi-sages worked together to create a new pocket dimension on the peak of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. As for the entrance, it was located on the peak of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors were busy building the new pocket dimension. At the same time, the first batch of troops from the Tiana continent finally arrived on the Tianqian continent. This time, the number of people who came was obviously greater. More than 10 starships landed on the Tianqian continent. From these starships, more than 100,000 Tiana continent cultivators arrived on the Tianqian continent. These people were naturally very curious about the unfamiliar Tianqian continent, but now they did not have time to play around. Soon, they threw themselves into the establishment of the new sect. The establishment of the new sect was in full swing. Everyone in the Heavenly Chan continent knew that perhaps in the near future, there would be a new giant sect in the Heavenly Chan continent. It was hard to imagine the scene after the establishment of the new sect, but there was no doubt that the new sect's strength would be formidable. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. End of this chapter, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.